Welcome, dear traveler, to this quiet space of reflection and rest. Before we begin our journey into the deep past, I invite you to take a moment to settle yourself completely. Find a position that feels natural and effortless. Allow your shoulders to drop away from your ears, and let the weight of your body sink into the surface beneath you. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your breath, a slow and steady rhythm that belongs only to you. In this space, there is no hurry, and there are no demands. The world outside is fading away, leaving only the soft sound of my voice and the unfolding story of a time long gone. Tonight, we are traveling back hundreds of years to a land of high mountains and vast, rolling plains. We are going to a place where the air smells of wild thyme and wood smoke, and where the passage of time is measured not by hours, but by the movement of the stars and the changing of the seasons. This is a journey through the history of a great empire, but we begin at its very roots, in a time of stillness and transition. This is a story designed to carry you towards sleep, a peaceful exploration of a world that once was. As you listen, let your mind drift like a cloud over the Anatolian plateau. There is nothing you need to remember, and nothing you need to do. Just breathe. Listen, and allow yourself to be carried away by the slow current of history. Let us begin our journey in the quiet heart of Anatolia. In the years when the old world was softly fading and a new world was waiting to be born, the land of Anatolia is a place of immense silence and ancient memory. To understand the beginning of our story, we must first imagine the landscape itself. For the land shaped the people long before the people shaped the land. Imagine a vast plateau, high above the sea, where the horizon stretches out in every direction until it meets the soft blue of the sky. In the center of this land, the earth is often dry and golden, covered in hardy grasses that shimmer in the heat of the afternoon sun. But as you move toward the edges of this great plateau, the ground begins to rise and ripple, forming the mighty peaks of the Taurus Mountains in the south and the Pontic Mountains in the north. These mountains are like the silent guardians of the land, their tops often dusted with white snow, even when the valleys below are blooming with the first flowers of spring. In the time we are visiting, the late 13th century, the great Seljuk Sultanate of Rum had begun to lose its firm grip on these lands. The grand palaces and the bustling trade routes were still there, but the central power was fading, like the light of a long summer evening. This created a peculiar kind of quiet throughout the countryside. It was a time of small beginnings, a time when the land was divided into many small pieces, each one a little world of its own. In this era, Anatolia was a mosaic of different cultures, languages, and ways of life, all existing together under the wide, open sky. If you were to stand on a high ridge during this time, you would see the smoke of many small fires rising from the valleys. These fires belonged to the nomadic tribes, the people who lived in harmony with the rhythm of the earth. These tribes moved with the seasons, a practice known as transhumance. In the heat of the summer, they would lead their flocks of sheep and goats up into the high mountain pastures, where the air was cool and the grass was lush and green. These high summer pastures, called yalas, were places of great beauty and peace. Here, the only sounds were the tinkling of sheep bells, the whistling of the wind through the crags, and the occasional call of a shepherd echoing across the slopes. The nomads lived in large, circular tents made of thick, goat hair felt. These tents were marvels of simple engineering, designed to be warm in the freezing winter and cool in the baking summer. Inside, the floors were covered with hand-woven carpets, rich with the colors of madder, root, and indigo. The air inside the tent would smell of wool, dried herbs, and the faint, sweet scent of milk. Life in these camps moved slowly. There was a routine to everything: the milking of the animals at dawn, the spinning of wool into long, sturdy threads, and the baking of flat bread over open flames. Each task was done with a sense of patience, a deep understanding that some things cannot be rushed. As the sun began to set over the Anatolian hills, the light would turn a deep, burnished gold, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. This was the hour of transition, when the work of the day was put aside and the community gathered together. The nomads were a people of stories and songs around the evening fire. The elders would recount tales of their ancestors who had traveled thousands of miles from the distant east, across the great steppes of Central Asia. They spoke of the legendary Oghuz, Khans, and the various tribes that made up their people. One of these tribes was the Kayı, a small group of people who carried with them a sense of quiet destiny, though they did not yet know what the future held. They were a practical people, skilled in horsemanship and the arts of survival, but they were also deeply spiritual. Their lives were infused with a sense of the divine, a feeling that every mountain, every river, and every gust of wind was a manifestation of a higher power. This spirituality was not rigid or cold. It was as natural as breathing. It was a blend of ancient traditions and the gentle teachings of the Sufi mystics who wandered through the land. During this period, Anatolia was home to many such wandering thinkers and poets. These were the dervishes, men who had set aside the comforts of the world to seek a deeper truth. They traveled from village to village and camp to camp, carrying nothing but a staff and a bowl. Their presence brought a sense of calm and perspective to the people they visited. They spoke of love, of kindness, and of the importance of the inner life. Perhaps the most famous of these voices was that of Jalaluddin Rumi, who lived in the city of Konya, though he lived in a city. His influence drifted across the plains like the scent of jasmine. He taught that the heart was a mirror, and that by clearing away the dust of ego and pride, one could reflect the light of the Creator. This atmosphere of spiritual searching and humble devotion created a unique foundation for the society that was beginning to form. People were bound together not just by tribal loyalty, but by a shared sense of wandering, of being travelers in this world, seeking a home that was both physical and spiritual. The seasons in Anatolia were profound and brought with them a sense of the inevitable passage of time. When autumn arrived, the air would turn crisp and clear, and the nomads would begin their long descent from the high pastures. This was a slow process, a grand procession of people, animals, and belongings moving down the mountain trails. The sheep, their fleeces thick and heavy, moved in a great undulating wave of white and gray. The horses, sturdy and sure-footed, carried the folded tents and the large copper cooking pots. There was a rhythmic quality to this movement, a steady pulse that had been repeated for generations. As they reached the lower valleys and the sheltered plains, the tribes would prepare for the long winter. Winter in Anatolia could be harsh, with deep snows that blanketed the earth and silenced the world. During these months, the pace of life slowed even further. People stayed close to their fires, the warmth of the hearth becoming the center of their universe. This was a time for reflection, for the repairing of tools, and for the weaving of the intricate patterns that decorated their lives. The silence of a snowy Anatolian night is a deep, heavy thing, a silence that invites one to look inward and find peace in the small towns and settlements that dotted the landscape. The architecture reflected this same sense of permanence and calm. The Seljuks had left behind beautiful stone structures, mosques, madrasas, and caravans. A caravanserai was a roadside inn, built like a small fortress, where travelers and merchants could find safety and rest. These buildings were made of heavy, honey-colored stone, with grand arched entrances decorated with intricate geometric carvings. Stepping inside one of these inns was like entering another world. The thick stone walls kept the interior cool in the summer and warm in the winter. In the central courtyard, camels would rest after a long day's journey, and the sound of water splashing in a stone fountain provided a constant, soothing backdrop. Merchants from distant lands would sit together, sharing tea and stories of the road. There was a sense of safety here, a feeling that despite the changes happening in the world outside, There were places where the old traditions of hospitality and rest were still held sacred. The rivers of Anatolia also played their part in this slow-moving history. The Sakarya, the Kazalamak, and the Meander flowed through the valleys, their waters carving paths through the stone over thousands of years. The sound of a river at night is one of the most peaceful sounds in nature, a continuous, liquid murmur that speaks of the constant flow of time. The people of the land lived near these waters, using them to irrigate their small plots of land where they grew apricots, pomegranates, and wheat. The relationship between the people and the water was one of deep respect. They knew that the river could be a source of life, but also a force of nature that demanded humility. Near the banks of these rivers, one might find a small flour mill, its wooden wheel turning slowly in the current, the creaking of the timber blending with the rush of the water. Everything was connected in a cycle of growth and harvest, of movement and rest. As the 13th century drew toward its close, the various Turkic principalities, or beyliks, began to assert their own identities. Among them were the Germanids, the Karamanids, and the Hamidids. Each of these groups occupied a different part of the landscape, and for a long time, there was a delicate balance between them. They were like many small streams flowing across the same plain, occasionally crossing paths but mostly following their own courses. There was no sense of urgency, no grand plan for empire. Life was lived in the present moment. A shepherd tending his flock on a hillside near the Byzantine border would not have known that he was standing on the edge of a new era. To him, the world was the grass beneath his feet, the sky above his head, and the safety of his family. Yet, it was in this very atmosphere of fragmentation and local focus that the seeds of something much larger were being sown in the borderlands between the fading Seljuk influence and the equally weary Byzantine Empire. A small group of people led by a man named Ertugrul had been granted a small piece of land near the town of St. This land was green and fertile, nestled in the foothills, where the mountains met the plains. It was a modest beginning, a small settlement of tents and a few simple stone buildings. The people here were part of the Kayı tribe, and they carried with them the same traditions of the plateau, the same love for their horses, the same devotion to their faith, and the same quiet resilience. They were Ghazis, a term that at the time meant something akin to frontiersmen or pioneers. Their lives were lived on the edge, in the spaces between empires, where the rules were different and the future was unwritten. But even here, in this place of potential conflict, the overarching feeling was one of stillness. The battles of the time were often small, local affairs, conducted with a sense of ritual and honor, and they did not disturb the deep, underlying peace of the countryside for long. The nights in Seine were particularly beautiful. As the stars began to appear, one by one, in the vast dark dome of the sky, the settlement would grow quiet. The horses were tethered, their occasional soft whinnies, the only sound in the darkness. The smell of the earth, damp with evening dew, would rise to meet the cool air. In these moments, the boundary between the earth and the heavens seemed too thin. A person looking up at the Milky Way might feel a profound sense of their own smallness, but also a sense of belonging to a much larger story. The stars were the same stars that had guided their ancestors across the steppes, and they were the same stars that would shine over the great cities yet to be built. This connection to the past and the future, rooted in the simple reality of the present, was the true strength of these people. They were not looking for glory. They were looking for a place to belong, a place where their children could grow and their flocks could graze in peace. Spiritual life continued to be the quiet heartbeat of this society, in the small mosques and the humble dervish lodges, or texts. The air was often thick with the scent of burning amber and the sound of soft chanting. The Sufis taught that the world was a garden, and that each person was a gardener responsible for the beauty of their own soul. They practiced a form of meditation that involved the repetition of sacred names, a rhythmic practice that calmed the mind and opened the heart. This repetition was like the turning of a potter's wheel or the beating of a weaver's loom. It was a way of finding the center, the point of stillness in the middle of a changing world. This spiritual grounding gave the people a sense of internal stability, no matter what happened in the halls of power. The inner life remained a sanctuary of peace. The education of the young was also a slow and careful process. It was not done in crowded classrooms, but through apprenticeship and example. A young boy would learn the art of the bow or the care of a horse by watching his father and his uncles. He would learn the stories of his people by listening to the elders around the fire. A young girl would learn the secrets of the loom, how to dye wool with the colors of the earth, and how to read the patterns that told the history of her tribe. There was no rush to grow up, no pressure to achieve. Each stage of life was honored for what it was. This respect for the natural progression of time was a key part of the Anatolian soul. They understood that a tree does not grow in a day, and that a great river begins with a single drop of rain. As we linger in this period before the rise of the great sultans, we can feel the weight of the silence. It is a productive silence, like the silence of a field in winter, resting before the burst of spring. The land is waiting. The mountains are waiting. The people are moving through their daily lives with a quiet grace, unaware that they are the ancestors of a world-shaping power. They are content with the warmth of their tea, the companionship of their tribes, and the beauty of the Anatolian sun. The transition from the Seljuks to the Ottomans was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, organic fading of one color into another, like the sky at dusk. It was a time of small local heroisms and quiet, everyday virtues. The geography of the region continued to play its role in shaping the destiny of the people. To the west lay the lands of the Byzantines, a world of ancient stone cities and complex bureaucracies. To the east lay the remnants of the Seljuk world and the distant threat of the Mongols, who had swept through the land decades earlier, leaving a trail of change in their wake. But in the heart of Anatolia, in the valleys and on the plateaus, life remained remarkably consistent. The people were resilient. They had seen empires come and go, and they knew that the earth remained long after the kings were forgotten. This resilience was not loud or aggressive. It was the resilience of the grass that bends in the wind but does not break. It was the resilience of the shepherd who stays with his flock through the storm, knowing that the sun will eventually return. The horses of the Turkic tribes were legendary, and they were treated with a respect that bordered on the sacred. A man's horse was his companion, his livelihood, and his freedom. These horses were small, hardy, and incredibly fast, capable of traveling long distances over difficult terrain. In the quiet afternoons, you might see a young man grooming his horse with great care, his movements slow and methodical. The bond between the rider and the animal was built on years of shared experience and mutual trust. When the tribe moved, the horses moved with a collective grace, their hooves creating a soft, rhythmic thrumming on the earth that sounded like a second heartbeat. This connection to the animal world was another layer of the nomad's harmony with nature. Food in this time was simple and wholesome, reflecting the bounty of the land and the lifestyle of the people. A typical meal might consist of freshly baked flatbread, thick yogurt, a few olives, and perhaps some dried fruits or nuts. On special occasions, a lamb might be roasted over a slow fire, the meat becoming tender and infused with the scent of wood smoke. Eating was a communal activity, a time for sharing and for gratitude. There were no chairs or high tables. People sat on the ground on woven mats, forming a circle that included everyone. This circular way of living in their tents, in their social gatherings, and in their spiritual practices reinforced the idea of equality and connection. No one was above another when they sat down to break bread. As the years drifted by, the small settlement at Saint began to feel more like a home. The people planted orchards and built more permanent structures, but they never lost their nomadic spirit. They were a bridge between two worlds, the world of the wandering tribe and the world of the settled town. This dual identity gave them a unique perspective. They understood the need for roots, but they also understood the importance of being able to move when the situation required it. This flexibility would become one of their greatest strengths. They were like the willow tree, which can grow by the river and provide shade, but whose branches are supple enough to withstand the strongest gales. The spiritual atmosphere of Anatolia was further enriched by the presence of the Ahi, brotherhoods. These were guilds of craftsmen and merchants who followed a strict code of ethics and spiritual discipline. An Ahi was expected to be generous, honest, and hardworking. They were the backbone of the urban social fabric, providing a sense of order and mutual support. In an Ahi lodge, a young apprentice would learn not just a trade, but how to be a person of character. They would eat together, pray together, and help those in need. This tradition of futua, or spiritual chivalry, ensured that the growing towns were places of stability and kindness. It was another thread in the rich tapestry of the time, a thread that favored the common good over individual ambition. The light in Anatolia has a quality that is hard to describe. It is a clear, penetrating light that makes every detail stand out: the texture of a stone, the veins in a leaf, the ripples on a pond. In the early morning, this light is cool and silver, gradually warming to a soft pink, and then a bright, clear gold. Watching the sunrise over the plateau is a lesson in patience. The light slowly reveals the world, layer by layer, until the entire landscape is bathed in warmth. For the people of the 13th century, this daily return of the sun was a reminder of the cyclical nature of life. As we wander through this landscape, we can see the figures of people moving in the distance. A woman carrying a jar of water on her shoulder, her pace steady and sure. A group of children playing in the dust, their laughter a bright, clear sound in the still air. An old man sitting in the shade of a plane tree, his eyes closed as he enjoys the cool breeze. These are the people of the transition. They are not famous, and their names are mostly lost to history, but they are the ones who carried the culture forward. They are the ones who kept the fires burning and the stories alive. Their lives were a testament to the beauty of the ordinary. The sacredness of the everyday, the dream of a new world, was beginning to form. But it was a quiet dream, like the first stirrings of a seed beneath the soil. It was a dream of justice, of order, and of a place where different people could live together in peace. It was not a dream of conquest, but a dream of belonging. The Kayı tribe, under the leadership of Ertugrul, and eventually his son Osman, were the keepers of this dream. They moved through the world with a quiet confidence, not seeking to dominate, but seeking to serve the people and the land. They were guided by the wisdom of the elders and the visions of the dervishes. One such vision, famously attributed to Osman, spoke of a great tree growing from his heart, its branches covering the world. But at this point in our story, the tree is just a small sapling, barely visible above the grass. The wind continues to blow across the Anatolian plateau, carrying with it the echoes of the past. If you listen closely, you can hear the sound of the flutes played by the shepherds, a haunting melodic sound that seems to capture the very soul of the landscape. The flute, or ney, is a central instrument in Sufi music. It is said to represent the human soul, hollowed out by longing and filled with the breath of the divine. Its music is a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, a reminder that we are all part of a larger harmony. In the quiet hours of the night, the sound of the ney would drift across the camps, a soothing lullaby that reminded everyone that they were not alone. The history of the Ottoman Empire is often told through the stories of great battles and powerful sultans, but its true beginning is found here, in the silence and the daily routines of the Anatolian people. It is found in the way a mother tucked her child into a wool blanket, the way a farmer looked at the sky to predict the rain, and the way a traveler was welcomed into a home with a cup of warm tea. These are the small, quiet threads that weave together to form the fabric of an empire. As we prepare to move forward in our story, let us take one last look at this world of the late 13th century. Let us appreciate its stillness, its simplicity, and its deep, abiding peace. The fires in the camps are now burning low, the glowing embers casting a soft, orange light on the faces of those who remain awake. The stars are at their brightest, a glittering tapestry that seems to watch over the world with a gentle, silent gaze. The land is at rest. The mountains are dark silhouettes against the midnight sky, and the rivers flow on, their voices a constant murmur in the dark. There is a sense of completion in this moment, a feeling that everything is exactly as it should be. The old world is resting, and the new world is sleeping, waiting for the first light of a new dawn. As you listen to these words, feel the stillness of that Anatolian night settling over you. Imagine the coolness of the air and the warmth of the fire. Let the slow, rhythmic pace of that ancient life become your own. There is no need to think about what comes next. There is only this moment, this breath, and this peaceful journey through time. The landscape is vast and quiet, and you are a part of it. Drifting slowly through the golden fields and over the high, silent mountains. The story of the Ottomans is just beginning, but for now, we remain here, in the quiet heart of the beginning, where the world is still and the heart is at peace. The nomads in their tents are dreaming of green pastures and clear springs. The dervishes in their lodges are lost in the silence of their prayers. The stone walls of the caravanserais hold the stories of 1,000 travelers, each one a thread in the great story of humanity. The Anatolian earth, which has seen so much and held so many, continues its slow turn through the cosmos. It is a land of deep roots and wide horizons, a land that teaches us the value of waiting and the power of peace. As the night deepens, the silence grows even more profound, a heavy, velvet cloak that wraps around the world and invites us to let go. The transition from day to night is a mirror of the transition between eras. Just as the sun sets to allow the stars to shine, so the old powers faded to allow new ones to emerge. But in the space between, there is a beauty that belongs only to the twilight. It is a time of soft edges and quiet possibilities. In this twilight of the 13th century, Anatolia was a place of grace. It was a place where the simple act of living was a form of worship, and where the passage of time was a sacred journey. Let this feeling of grace fill your mind as you drift closer to sleep. Let the images of the high plateaus and the mountain fires linger in your thoughts like the fading scent of a summer garden. We have walked through the golden grasses and sat by the evening fires. We have heard the stories of the ancestors and the songs of the wandering poets. We have felt the rhythm of the seasons and the pulse of the earth. This is the foundation upon which all the history that follows was built. It was not built on gold or steel, but on the quiet strength of a people who knew how to live in harmony with the world and with each other. This strength is timeless, and it is still there. In the silence of the Anatolian mountains and the flow of the Anatolian rivers, it is a strength that we can draw upon even now, as we seek our own place of rest and peace. The shadows are long and soft now, and the world is fading into the deep blue of the night. The story of the Kayı and the early days of St. will wait for another time. For now, there is only the silence. There is only the breath. There is only the gentle, slow movement of history as it carries us toward the horizon of sleep. The land is at rest, and so are you. The journey has been long, but the path has been peaceful, and the destination is the quiet sanctuary of your own dreams. As we linger in these final moments of our first chapter, let the weight of your body feel even heavier, even more relaxed. Think of the thick, soft carpets on the floor of a nomadic tent and how they cushion every step. Think of the heavy wool blankets that keep out the chill of the mountain night. Everything around you is designed for comfort and for rest. The world of Anatolia is a world of gentle touch and soft sounds. Even the wind, when it blows across the high plateau, sounds like a long, slow sigh. Let that sigh be your own, as you release any remaining tension and allow yourself to be fully present in this space of stillness. The history we are exploring is like a deep, slow-moving river. We are currently near its source, where the water is clear and the current is gentle. There are no rapids here, no turbulent falls. There is only the steady, peaceful flow of time. As we continue our journey in the parts to come, we will see the river grow wider and more powerful. But the water will always carry the memory of these quiet beginnings. The peace of the Anatolian highlands will always be the heart of the empire, no matter how far its borders eventually reach. Rest now, in the knowledge that you are safe, and that the story will continue when the time is right. The ancestors are watching over the camp, the fires are tended, and the stars are in their places. There is nothing left to do but drift. The journey of 1,000 years begins with a single, quiet night, and this night is yours. Feel the coolness of the air on your forehead and the warmth of the blankets around you. Let the soft, rhythmic sound of my voice fade into the background, becoming just another part of the night's peaceful symphony. In the distance, a lone wolf may howl at the moon, but it is a sound of the wilderness, a reminder of the vast, natural world that surrounds us. It is not a sound to be feared, but a sound to be respected. It is part of the balance. The sheep in their folds are safe, and the people in their tents are warm. The world is in balance. The history of the Ottomans is a story of balance between the nomad and the city dweller, between the sword and the pen, between the earth and the sky. But here, at the beginning, the balance is found in the simple silence of a winter's night. As you drift further into the quiet realms of sleep, let the landscape of Anatolia become a dreamscape. Imagine yourself walking slowly through a field of wild lavender, the scent rising around you with every step. The sun is just beginning to set, and the sky is a masterpiece of orange, purple, and gold. In the distance, you see the silhouettes of the mountains, their peaks glowing with the last light of day. There is no one else here, just you and the land and the vast, beautiful sky. You feel a sense of profound peace, a feeling that you are exactly where you are meant to be. This is the land where history began, and it is a land of eternal rest. The journey through the history of the Ottoman Empire will be a long one, filled with many wonders and many stories. But every great journey requires a good night's rest. We have laid the foundation tonight, exploring the soil from which the empire grew. We have breathed the air of the high plateaus and felt the warmth of the tribal fires. We have met the people of the transition and shared in their quiet, resilient lives. This is the first step, the most important step. It is the step that grounds us and prepares us for everything that is to come. Now, let the images fade. Let the words become a soft hum, like the sound of a distant river. The Anatolian night has fully arrived, and the world is asleep. You are part of that sleep, part of that stillness. The history of the past is a bridge to the peace of the present. Cross that bridge now, slowly and gently. The stars will guide you, and the silence will hold you. There is no more to say, and no more to hear. There is only the rest that you have earned, and the dreams that await you in the quiet heart of the night. As the final embers of our fire turn to gray ash, and the cool breath of the night settles over the plateau, feel your mind drifting even further away from the waking world. The story of the land, the tribes, and the slow passage of time has been told, and it now lives within you, a quiet pulse of history that requires no effort to maintain. The mountains of Anatolia are standing silent, as they have for millions of years, and the stars continue their eternal dance. You are part of this great, slow rhythm. There is a profound comfort in knowing that the world goes on, that the seasons return, and that peace is always findable in the stillness of the heart. Let yourself sink deeper into your bed, feeling the support of the earth beneath you. Just as the nomads felt the support of their ancient land, the journey of the day is over, and the journey of the night has begun. May your rest be as deep as the Anatolian valleys, and as peaceful as the silence between the stars. The soft light of memory and the gentle flow of time are all that remain now. The story has done its work, leading you to the threshold of sleep. As you cross that threshold, know that the world we have explored tonight remains there, in the quiet corners of history, waiting for us to return when we are ready. But for now, that world and this world are one, joined in the perfect stillness of the night. Sleep is a natural state, a return to the source, a chance for the soul to wander in the high pastures of dreams. Go there now, with a light heart and a quiet mind. Everything is at rest. Everything is at peace. The story will be here when you wake, but for now, there is only the beautiful, dark, and silent night. The breath of the world is slow and steady. The spirit of the land is calm. The history of the ages is a lullaby, whispered by the wind and carried by the rivers. You are safe, you are held, and you are free to let go. Let the darkness be a soft blanket, and let the silence be a gentle song. The world of the Ottomans, the world of the Seljuks, and the world of the wandering tribes are all resting now, and so should you. Sleep, dear traveler, and find your peace in the timeless embrace of the past. The stars are high, the fire is out, and the night is yours, now. As the story gently concludes, let the silence take over. Let the rhythm of your breath be the only sound you hear. The journey through the ancient lands of Anatolia has brought you here, to this moment of total relaxation. Feel the peace of the high mountains, and the stillness of the golden plains deep within your spirit. There is no need to move, no need to think. The story will continue in its own time, but for now, the only task is to rest. Let the quiet energy of the history we have shared surround you like a warm, protective cloak. You are drifting in a sea of calm, where time has no meaning and the world is a place of infinite peace. As you move closer to sleep, remember that the story of humanity is a story of many beginnings and many endings, all woven together in a beautiful, endless pattern. You are a thread in that pattern, as vital and as peaceful as any other. The quiet strength of the ancestors is with you, and the timeless beauty of the earth is your home. Let your eyelids become heavy, let your thoughts become soft and blurry, and let yourself be carried away by the gentle current of rest. The history of the world is a long and winding path, but tonight, that path leads directly to the sanctuary of your own dreams. Welcome back, dear listener, to this quiet sanctuary of time and story. As we settle in once more, I invite you to take a deep, slow breath, feeling the air fill your lungs, and then leave your body with a gentle, easing sigh. You are safe here, nestled in the warmth of the present moment, while we prepare to drift back into the soft folds of the past. Imagine the world outside your window is fading away, replaced by the soft light of a setting sun over the ancient hills of Anatolia. There is no rush, no urgency, and nothing required of you except to simply be. Feel the tension leaving your muscles, starting from your forehead, moving down through your jaw, and settling into your shoulders, which grow heavier and more relaxed with every passing second. We are returning to the story of a small tribe and a great dream, a journey that began in the silence of the mountains and eventually touched the horizons of the world. Tonight, we focus on the quiet beginnings of a man named Osman, and the slow, steady growth of the seeds planted by his father. Let the rhythm of my voice be a steady anchor, a calm current that carries you toward a deep and restorative rest. As the shadows lengthen and the night air turns cool and sweet, allow your mind to drift like smoke from a dying fire, floating upward toward the silver stars that have watched over these stories for centuries. Everything is still, everything is peaceful, and the journey continues. In the small settlement of St. D, the transition of time was as natural and quiet as the turning of the leaves in autumn. For many years, the tribe had been led by Ertugrul, a man of great patience and steady hand, who had guided his people through the shifting sands of the late 13th century. Ertugrul was like an old oak tree, deeply rooted in the earth, providing shade and shelter for all who lived beneath his branches. Under his leadership, the Kayı tribe had found a place of belonging in the fertile lands granted to them. A place where the mountains met, the plains, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wild thyme. As Ertugrul grew older, his presence became even more serene, a reflection of a life lived in harmony with the rhythms of the land and the requirements of his faith. He spent his final years sitting in the warmth of the sun, watching the young men tend the horses and the women weave the intricate patterns of their history into the wool of their carpets. There was a profound sense of continuity in his presence, a bridge between the wandering days of the past and the settled future that was slowly taking shape. When the time eventually came for the leadership to pass to his son Osman, it did not happen with a sudden roar or a dramatic shift, but with the quiet inevitability of a new day dawning. Osman had grown up in the shadow of his father's wisdom, learning the language of the wind, the needs of the flock, and the importance of silence. Osman was a man of few words, possessing a stillness that commanded respect without the need for loud commands. He was often found by the banks of the small streams that fed the Sakarya River, his eyes fixed on the moving water as if he were reading the secrets of the world in its ripples. His face was weathered by the sun and the wind, but his expression was always one of deep, inner calm. To his people, he was more than just a leader. He was a guardian of their way of life. Daily life in Saint under Osman's guidance was a tapestry of simple, repetitive tasks that brought a sense of order and peace to the community. The morning would begin with the soft light of dawn filtering through the felt of the tents, creating a warm, amber glow within. The first sounds were always the same, the gentle stirring of the sheep, the distant call of a bird, and the quiet crackle of the morning fires being kindled. There was a sacredness to these early hours, a time when the world felt fresh and new, and the possibilities of the day were as vast as the sky. The women would begin the process of making bread, their hands moving with a grace born of years of practice, kneading the dough until it was soft and supple. The smell of the baking bread would soon fill the air, a comforting and ancient scent that signaled the start of the day's work. The men of the tribe spent much of their time with the horses, the animals that were the pride and the lifeblood of the Kayı. These were not mere beasts of burden, but companions and partners in the journey of life. Osman himself had a deep bond with his horses, often spending hours in their company, grooming their coats and checking their hooves with a gentle, methodical care. The relationship between the rider and the horse was built on a foundation of mutual trust and quiet communication. On the open plains around Saint, you could see the young men training, their movements fluid and effortless as they rode across the golden grass. There was no aggression in these exercises, only a pursuit of mastery and a celebration of the animal's strength and speed. The thud of hooves on the earth was a rhythmic, grounding sound, a heartbeat that echoed the pulse of the land itself. In the afternoons, when the sun was high and the heat settled over the valley, the tribe would seek the shade of the large plane trees that grew near the water. Here, the elders would sit and talk, their voices low and melodic, sharing stories of the old days and offering advice to the younger generation. Osman would often sit among them, listening more than he spoke, his mind absorbing the collective wisdom of his people. The spiritual life of the tribe was centered around the presence of the dervishes and the local holy men, who brought a sense of divine mystery to the everyday world. Among these was Sheikh Edebali, a man of immense spiritual depth and learning, who lived in a small lodge not far from the settlement. Osman felt a strong pull toward the sheikh, sensing in him a mirror of the truths he sought in the natural world. Their relationship was one of teacher and student, but it was also a deep friendship based on a shared love for the Creator and his creation. Osman would often travel to the sheikh's lodge, a journey made in silence and reflection. The lodge was a place of extreme tranquility, where the air was always cool, and the sound of the ney flute could often be heard drifting through the hallways. Inside, the walls were simple and unadorned, reflecting the Sufi belief that the true beauty of the world is found within the heart. Osman and the sheikh would sit together for hours, sometimes speaking of the deeper meanings of the faith, and sometimes simply sitting in a shared silence that was more meaningful than any words. It was during one of these visits, after a long evening of contemplation and prayer, that Osman experienced the vision that would define the destiny of his people for centuries to come. As the night deepened and the lodge grew quiet, Osman fell into a deep and peaceful sleep. In his dream, he saw a moon rising from the chest of Sheikh Edebali, a moon that shone with a soft, ethereal light. The moon drifted through the air, glowing brighter and brighter, until it eventually entered Osman's own chest. At that moment, a great tree began to grow from his navel. Its trunk thick and sturdy, its bark rough with the texture of ancient wisdom. The tree grew with an incredible, silent speed, its branches stretching out toward the four corners of the world. It was a tree of immense beauty, its leaves of vibrant, shimmering green, and its fruit rich and abundant. As Osman watched, the branches of the tree reached over the great mountains of the world, the Atlas, the Taurus, the Caucasus, and the Balkans. From the roots of the great tree, four mighty rivers began to flow: the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Nile, and the Danube. The world beneath the tree was a place of perfect harmony and peace. Cities of white stone and blue tiles flourished in its shade, their markets filled with the bounty of the earth, and their gardens blooming with flowers from every land. People of all nations and all beliefs walked together under the branches, protected and sheltered by the immense canopy of the tree. The wind blowing through the leaves sounded like 1,000 voices joined in a single, peaceful song. When Osman woke from the dream, the lodge was still, and the first light of dawn was just beginning to touch the horizon. He felt a profound sense of clarity and purpose, a feeling that he had been shown a glimpse of a future that was already written in the stars. He sought out Sheikh Edebali and recounted the dream in every detail, his voice steady and calm. The sheikh listened in silence, his eyes closed as he absorbed the weight of the vision. After a long moment, he opened his eyes and looked at Osman with a gaze of deep affection and respect. He told Osman that the dream was a divine message, a sign that the leadership of the people had been blessed, and that a great empire would rise from his line. The tree represented the growth of a state that would provide shade and justice to the world, a state built on the foundations of faith, mercy, and the quiet strength Osman had cultivated in the hills of Saint. This interpretation was not a call to immediate action or a promise of easy glory. It was an invitation to a life of service and responsibility. The dream remained with Osman like a soft light in the back of his mind, guiding his decisions and infusing his daily life with a deeper sense of meaning. Life in St continued its slow and steady pace, but there was a new, subtle energy in the air. The settlement was growing, attracting people from all over Anatolia who were drawn to the sense of peace and justice that Osman provided. He governed with a light touch, preferring mediation to conflict and fairness to force. In the small market that had grown near the center of the village, trade was conducted with a sense of honor and honesty that was rare in the turbulent world of the border. A merchant could leave his goods unattended, knowing that they would be safe, and a traveler could find a warm meal and a place to rest without fear. This atmosphere of trust was the true foundation of the emerging state. It was a community built on the principle that the well-being of the whole was dependent on the integrity of the individual. Osman would often walk through the market, his presence a quiet reassurance to the people. He would stop to talk to a potter about the quality of the clay, or listen to a farmer describe the progress of his crops. These small interactions were the threads that bound the community together, creating a sense of shared destiny that was stronger than any legal decree. The geography of the region around St continued to shape the character of the people. The land was a blend of rugged hills and fertile valleys, a landscape that required both strength and adaptability. To the west, the Byzantine lands were a constant presence, a world of ancient stone walls and fading grandeur. Osman maintained a careful and respectful relationship with his neighbors, often engaging in trade and diplomacy that benefited both sides. There was a sense of mutual respect between the frontier lords, a shared understanding of the challenges of living on the edge of two worlds. The borders were not lines of conflict, but places of exchange and interaction. The slow expansion of Osman's influence was not the result of sudden conquests, but of a gradual integration of neighboring lands and peoples who saw the benefits of his leadership. It was like the way a forest slowly spreads across a field, one tree at a time, until the landscape is transformed. The seasons brought their own lessons and their own rhythms to the life of the Kayı. In the winter, when the snow covered the hills and the wind howled through the passes, the tribe would gather close to their fires, the warmth of the hearth becoming the center of their existence. This was a time for the telling of long stories, for the repairing of tools, and for the teaching of the young. Osman would sit with his sons Orhan and Aladdin, and speak to them about the responsibilities of leadership and the importance of remaining true to their roots. He taught them that power was not something to be sought for its own sake, but a trust to be held for the benefit of the people. He shared with them the vision of the great tree, not as a promise of wealth, but as a reminder of the shelter they were called to provide. The winter nights were long and cold, but the interior of the tents was filled with a sense of warmth and security. The flickering firelight would cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the sound of the wind outside only served to make the stillness inside feel more profound. As spring arrived, the land would burst into life with a vibrant energy that was both beautiful and grounding. The snow would melt, feeding the streams and rivers until they roared with new life. The hills would turn a brilliant emerald green, and the first wildflowers would begin to bloom, their colors a testament to the resilience of nature. This was the time for the tribe to prepare for the move to the high pastures, the summer yalas that offered cool air and fresh grass for the flocks. The process of moving was a grand and slow-moving event, a celebration of the nomadic heritage that remained at the core of their identity. Osman would lead the way, his horse moving with a steady, confident gait, as the thousands of sheep and goats followed in a great, bleeding wave. The movement through the mountain passes was a test of endurance and skill, a reminder of the strength and agility required to live in harmony with such a rugged landscape. Once they reached the high pastures, life took on a different, even more relaxed pace. The air was thin and clear, and the views stretched out for miles in every direction. Here under the wide open sky, the connection to the divine felt even more direct and unmediated. In the high pastures, the days were filled with the simple tasks of pastoral life. The women would gather the milk and transform it into yogurt and cheese, their movements synchronized with the ancient rhythms of their ancestors. The men would keep watch over the flocks, their eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of trouble. Though the mountain heights were generally peaceful and safe, at night, the sky was a canopy of brilliant stars, so close that it felt as if you could reach out and touch them. Osman would often sit outside his tent, wrapped in a heavy wool cloak, and gaze up at the heavens. He thought of the moon that had entered his chest and the tree that had grown from his navel, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life he had been given. He understood that his role was to be like the mountain, steady, enduring, and a source of protection for those who sought refuge in his shadows. This sense of being a part of something much larger than himself was the source of his profound and unwavering calm. The years passed like the steady flow of a river, each one bringing its own changes and its own growth. The small settlement at Saint was becoming the center of a growing network of villages and towns, all united by a shared sense of purpose and a shared respect for Osman's leadership. The Kayı tribe was no longer just a group of nomads. They were the heart of a new society that was being born in the crucible of the Anatolian frontier. Yet, despite the growth and the changes, the core of their identity remained unchanged. They were still people of the tent, people of the horse, and people of the book. the values that had sustained them through their long journeys from the East. Loyalty, hospitality, and faith continued to be the guiding principles of their lives. Osman ensured that these values were passed down to the next generation, not just through words, but through the example of his own life. He remained humble, often dressing in the same simple wool garments as his people and performing the same daily tasks. He never lost his connection to the earth or his understanding of the simple truths that are found in the silence of the hills. The daily routine in St. was a source of comfort and stability for everyone. There was a rhythm to the work, a predictable cycle of activities that made the world feel safe and orderly. Even the smallest tasks were done with a sense of mindfulness and care. A blacksmith working at his forge would move with a rhythmic precision, the sound of his hammer on the glowing metal creating a steady, metallic pulse. A potter shaping a jar on his wheel would focus entirely on the movement of the clay beneath his fingers, his eyes seeing the finished form long before it was complete. This dedication to craft and to the quality of one's work was a form of meditation, a way of honoring the gifts of the Creator through the labor of one's hands. Osman encouraged this spirit of excellence, understanding that a strong society is built on the foundation of honest and meaningful work. The products of these labors, the sturdy tools, the beautiful pottery, the intricately woven carpets, were more than just objects. They were expressions of the soul of the people. As the sun began to set each day, the village would enter a period of soft transition. The harsh light of the afternoon would fade into the warm, golden hues of the evening, and the sounds of the day's work would gradually give way to the quieter sounds of the night. This was the time for the evening prayer, a moment when the entire community would pause to give thanks and to acknowledge their dependence on the divine. The sound of the call to prayer, rising from the small stone mosque, was a haunting and beautiful melody that seemed to hang in the still air. After the prayer, families would gather in their homes and tents for their evening meal. The atmosphere was one of warmth and companionship, as people shared the events of the day and looked forward to the rest of the night. Osman would often host guests in his home, ranging from local elders to traveling dervishes. He was known for his immense hospitality, always ensuring that his guests were treated with the utmost respect and care. The conversations around his hearth were always thoughtful and dignified, reflecting the high standards of conduct that he expected of himself and others. One of the most characteristic aspects of life in Osman's St. was the presence of the Ahi brotherhoods, whom we mentioned before, but who now played an even more central role in the social and economic life of the community. These guilds were more than just trade organizations. They were spiritual and social networks that provided a framework for ethical living. An Ahi was expected to be a person of impeccable character, dedicated to the service of others and the pursuit of spiritual perfection. They operated hostels for travelers, provided support for the poor and the elderly, and ensured that the quality of goods in the market was maintained at a high standard. The relationship between Osman and the Ahis was one of mutual support and shared values. They saw in him a leader who embodied the ideals of their brotherhood, and he saw in them the backbone of a stable and just society. The presence of the Ahis gave the growing towns a sense of order and moral purpose that was essential for their long-term success. The education of the youth in the tribe was another area where the values of the community were reinforced. It was a slow and natural process, based on observation, imitation, and the sharing of stories. A young man would learn the art of governance by watching how Osman handled disputes in the market, or how he conducted himself in meetings with other leaders. He would learn the importance of mercy by seeing how Osman treated the vulnerable and the defeated. A young woman would learn the secrets of the healing herbs by walking through the hills with the elder women, learning to identify the plants that could soothe a fever or heal a wound. There was a deep respect for the wisdom of the elders, and their words were listened to with a quiet and attentive reverence. This intergenerational connection ensured that the lessons of the past were not lost. but were integrated into the lives of the next generation. It was a culture of continuity, where the wisdom of the old and the energy of the young worked together to build a future that was both stable and dynamic. Osman's sons, Orhan and Aladdin, were a constant presence by his side, learning the weight of the legacy they were destined to carry. Orhan was like his father, a man of action and steady resolve, while Aladdin was more inclined toward scholarship and the inner life. Osman encouraged both of them to follow their own paths, understanding that a great state needs both the strength of the sword and the wisdom of the pen. He taught them that they were brothers first and leaders second, and that their strength lay in their unity and their shared commitment to the vision of the great tree. He would take them on long rides through the countryside, showing them the boundaries of their land and explaining the history of the different peoples who lived there. He wanted them to understand that they were not just ruling over a territory, but over a community of human beings, each with their own needs and their own stories. As the end of Osman's life approached, he did not feel a sense of fear or regret, but a deep sense of peace and completion. He looked back on the years since his dream at the Sheikh's lodge and saw how the seeds had grown. The small settlement at Saint had become the heart of a vibrant and growing Beylik, a place of safety and justice in a world that was often chaotic and uncertain. His people were prosperous and united, and his sons were ready to take up the mantle of leadership. He had remained true to the values of his father, Ertugrul, and had built a foundation that was strong enough to support the weight of the future. His final days were spent in the company of his family and his closest advisors. His voice remained soft and calm, even as his strength began to fade. He spoke of the dream one last time, reminding his sons that the true strength of the tree lay in its roots, and that they must never lose their connection to the earth or to the simple truths of their faith. The passing of Osman was a moment of profound sadness for the tribe, but it was also a moment of quiet celebration for a life well lived. He was buried in a simple tomb in the town of Bilcek, a place that reflected the humility and the dignity of his life. The tomb became a place of pilgrimage for his people, a site where they could come to remember his wisdom and to seek inspiration for their own lives. The legacy of Osman was not just in the lands he had acquired or the state he had founded, but in the character of the people he had led. He had shown them that it was possible to be both strong and merciful, both practical and spiritual. He had given them a sense of destiny that was rooted in the eternal truths of the divine and the enduring beauty of the land. The silence that followed Osman's passing was not a silence of emptiness, but a silence of reflection and preparation. The foundations had been laid, the seeds had been planted, and the first branches of the great tree were already beginning to reach toward the sky. The tribe of the Kayı, the people of the tent and the horse, were now the keepers of a vision that would change the course of history. As they looked toward the future, under the leadership of Orhan, they carried with them the memory of the man who had seen the moon in his chest and the rivers flowing from his heart. They knew that the journey would be long and the challenges would be great, but they also knew that they were not alone. The spirit of Osman, the quiet guardian of Saint, would be with them in every step they took and every mountain they crossed. The landscape of Anatolia remained as beautiful and as timeless as ever. The mountains still touched the sky, the rivers still flowed toward the sea, and the wind still whispered through the branches of the ancient plane trees. The daily routines of the people continued, the milking of the sheep, the baking of the bread, and the spinning of the wool. These simple, repetitive acts were the true heartbeat of the growing empire, the steady pulse that kept it alive and vibrant. The peace of St was not a static thing, but a living and breathing reality that was renewed with every dawn. It was a peace that came from a deep understanding of the world and a profound trust in the divine. As the night continues to deepen and the world of the early Ottomans drifts into the soft light of history, we can still feel the echo of that peace. It is a peace that invites us to slow down, to breathe, and to find our own place in the great, unfolding story of the world. As you listen to the final words of this chapter, feel the stillness of the night wrapping around you like a heavy wool cloak. The fires of St have burned down to glowing embers, and the stars are shining with a clear and steady light. The story of Osman and his dream is a reminder that great things often begin in the quietest of ways. It is a reminder that growth is a slow and natural process, and that the true strength of any endeavor is found in its roots. Let this sense of steady and inevitable growth fill your mind as you drift closer to sleep. Imagine the great tree of Osman's dream, its leaves rustling in the night wind, providing a vast and peaceful canopy over the entire world. You are safe beneath its branches, protected by the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. There is no more work to be done tonight, no more thoughts to be held. The world of the 14th century is at rest, and you are part of that rest. The rhythm of the seasons and the cycle of the days are the natural heartbeat of the earth, and you are in perfect harmony with that heartbeat. Let the image of the silver moon rising over the hills of St. be the last thing you see before you close your eyes and enter the world of your own dreams. The story of the Ottomans will continue, but for now, there is only the silence, the breath, and the deep and restorative peace of the night. The hills are dark silhouettes against the midnight sky, and the rivers are murmuring their ancient songs. The horses are quiet in their stalls, and the people are warm in their beds. The vision of the great tree remains a beacon of light in the darkness, a symbol of the shelter and the justice that are possible in this world. Rest now, dear traveler, and let the peace of Osman's dream be your own. The journey is long, but the night is quiet, and the destination is always within reach. Sleep well, and let the story of the past carry you toward the bright and hopeful dawn of a new day. As we linger in these final moments, let every muscle in your body relax completely. Feel the weight of your head on the pillow, the softness of the sheets against your skin, and the steady, rhythmic movement of your breath. You are drifting in a calm and timeless sea, where the worries of the world cannot reach you. The story of St and the early Kayı is a story of quiet resilience and enduring hope, a story that reminds us of the power of a simple life lived with integrity and faith. Let that hope and that resilience be with you as you sleep. Everything is peaceful. Everything is still. The world is at rest. And so are you. The story will wait for us in the next part, where we will see how the branches of the tree continued to grow under the leadership of Osman's son, Orhan. But for tonight, we remain here, in the quiet heart of the beginning, where the dream is still fresh and the future is a vast and open horizon. The light of the moon is soft, the air is cool, and the world is asleep. There is nothing left to do but let go and allow yourself to be carried away by the gentle currents of the night. Sleep, dear friend, and find your rest in the deep and timeless silence of history. As the last echoes of my voice fade into the stillness of the room, imagine the soft, rhythmic sound of a ney flute playing in the distance. Its melody is slow and melancholic, yet deeply comforting, a song of the soul returning to its source. Let that music be your guide as you enter the final stages of relaxation. The land of Anatolia is sleeping, and you are sleeping with it. The journey of Osman has led us to a place of peace, and that peace is now yours to keep. The dawn will come in its own time, but for now, the night is a sacred space of rest and renewal. Everything is calm, everything is quiet. Sleep now, and dream of the great tree and the rivers of peace. The stars are at their peak, a glittering blanket over the sleeping world. Each star is a tiny point of light, a reminder of the infinite beauty and order of the universe. You are a part of that beauty, a part of that order. There is a place for you in this vast and wonderful story, a place of rest and belonging. Feel the peace of that knowledge sinking deep into your heart, calming any remaining thoughts and bringing a final, perfect stillness to your mind. The story of the past is a gift of the present, a bridge to a peaceful future. May your sleep be deep, your dreams be kind, and your rest be complete as you drift away. The image of the great tree grows larger and more luminous, its leaves shimmering like diamonds in the moonlight. Its roots go down deep into the earth, connecting you to the ancient wisdom of the land. Its branches reach up to the heavens, connecting you to the eternal truths of the spirit. As the sun rose higher over the settlement of St, casting long, golden fingers across the thatched roofs and the sturdy felt of the tents, the life of the Kayı tribe unfolded with the slow, deliberate grace of a river carving its path through stone. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and the faint sweet tank of wood smoke from the morning fires. In this quiet corner of Anatolia, the passage of time was not measured by the frantic ticking of a clock, but by the lengthening shadows on the sun-bleached earth and the rhythmic sounds of a community in harmony with itself. The morning mist still clung to the valleys, a soft white blanket that muffled the world, making every sound, the distant lowing of cattle, the rhythmic thud of a loom, the gentle splashing of water at the well seemed like a part of a deep, ancient lullaby. To look upon scene these years was to see a world in a state of becoming, where every stone laid and every seed planted was an act of faith in a future that was growing as surely as the great oak in Osman's dream, near the center of the village. The communal well served as the heart of the morning's activity. Here, the women of the tribe gathered, their movements fluid and practiced as they lowered wooden buckets into the cool, dark depths. The sound of the rope creaking against the windlass was a steady, comforting pulse. They spoke in low tones, their voices blending into a melodic murmur that spoke of domestic rhythms, the health of a child, the quality of the latest wool harvest, the upcoming marriage of a neighbor's daughter. Their clothing dyed in deep earths and rich vegetable hues of madder red and indigo blue moved like colorful shadows against the dusty ground. Each woman wore a headscarf, often embroidered with tiny, delicate flowers or geometric patterns that had been passed down through generations, a silent language of heritage and belonging as they carried the heavy jars of water back to their homes, balanced effortlessly on their shoulders or hips. They walked with a dignity that was both humble and profound, the embodiment of the quiet strength that sustained the tribe. In the workshops scattered throughout the settlement, the artisans began their day with a sense of devotion that bordered on the spiritual. The weavers, in particular, worked with a focused intensity that made the act of creation seem like a form of prayer. Sitting before large, upright wooden looms, they passed the shuttles back and forth with a rhythmic clack-shee that became a background rhythm for the entire village. The wool they used was thick and soft, harvested from the sheep that grazed on the surrounding hillsides. It had been washed, carded, and spun into long, sturdy threads, and then dyed using roots, bark, and insects gathered from the wild. As the weavers worked, patterns began to emerge, stars, stylized birds, flowing vines, and the iconic tamga symbols of the Kayı. These carpets and kilims were more than mere floor coverings. They were stories woven into fabric, maps of the soul and the landscape, designed to protect the home and keep the memories of the ancestors alive. The atmosphere in the weaving rooms was always cool and quiet, the only light coming from narrow windows that caught the dust motes dancing in the air, creating a space of meditative calm where the hands moved while the mind rested. Meanwhile, the blacksmith's forge provided a different kind of music. The clink-clang of the hammer on the anvil was a bright, metallic song that echoed through the narrow streets. The blacksmith, a man of broad shoulders and soot-stained hands, worked with a fire that glowed a deep, pulsing orange in the dimness of his shop. He was not just a maker of tools. He was a sculptor of necessity. Under his hands, raw iron was transformed into plowshares, horsebits, and the sturdy nails that held their world together. There was a slow, hypnotic quality to the way he heated the metal until it was soft and glowing, then struck it with measured blows, each one precise and purposeful. The sparks that flew from the anvil were like tiny, short-lived stars, illuminating the concentration on his face. This was work that required patience and a deep understanding of the elements, a quiet heroism that ensured the tribe could till the earth and defend its borders. When the work was done, the hot iron was plunged into a trough of water, producing a long, hissing sigh of steam that signaled the completion of a cycle. Beyond the edges of the settlement, the landscape of Anatolia stretched out in all its rugged beauty. The plateau was a sea of rolling hills, covered in silver-green grasses that shivered in the breeze. In the distance, the mountains stood like silent sentinels, their peaks often hidden by soft, drifting clouds. These mountains were both a barrier and a source of life, providing the cool springs that fed the rivers and the high pastures where the animals thrived. The relationship between the people and the land was one of profound respect and interdependence. Every tree was seen as a gift, every spring a blessing. The shepherds who led the flocks into the hills were the guardians of this relationship. They lived a life of immense solitude and peace, their days spent under the vast dome of the sky. A shepherd might sit for hours on a rocky outcrop, his eyes scanning the horizon. His only companion, a sturdy, loyal dog, and the wooden flute he kept tucked into his belt. The music of the flute, or the cavale, was the voice of the mountains, lonely, high-pitched, and hauntingly beautiful. It was a sound that seemed to bridge the gap between the earth and the heavens, a melody that settled the nerves and brought a sense of timelessness to the listener. The rivers of the region, like the Sakarya, flowed with a steady, unhurried grace. Along their banks, the willow trees dipped their long green fingers into the water, and the reeds swayed in the current. The sound of the river was a constant, liquid murmur, a reminder of the continuous flow of life. In the quiet pools, fish darted like silver flashes, and birds of prey circled high above, their wings catching the thermal currents. The people used the river not just for water, but as a place of gathering and reflection. On warm afternoons, children would play in the shallows, their laughter ringing out like bells, while the elders sat on the banks, their feet cooled by the water, sharing stories of the great migrations and the heroes of old. There was a sense that the river carried the history of the land in its depths, moving it slowly toward the sea in the neighboring principalities. The beyliks that dotted the Anatolian landscape, life followed a similar, peaceful rhythm. While there were occasional disputes over grazing rights or trade routes, the overarching atmosphere was one of shared culture and mutual survival. These were people who spoke the same language, followed the same faith, and faced the same challenges of the frontier. A traveler moving from the lands of the Kayı to those of the Germanids or the Karamanids would find the same hospitality, the same traditions, and the same quiet devotion to the daily tasks of living. Hospitality was not just a custom, it was a sacred duty. A stranger arriving at a village would be welcomed with a cup of hot tea or aran, a bowl of soup, and a place by the fire. This culture of misseferberlik ensured that the roads, though long and often lonely, were never truly cold. It was through these small acts of kindness that the bonds between the various Turkic groups were strengthened, creating a hidden network of alliances that would one day form the bedrock of a great empire. The spiritual life of the community was deeply influenced by the wandering dervishes, the Abdals and Babas who traveled throughout Anatolia. These were men who had simplified their lives to the point of essence, carrying nothing but a staff, a bowl, and a heart full of divine love. They did not preach in the traditional sense. Instead, they lived as examples of humility and compassion. A dervish might arrive in Saint and sit under a tree, offering nothing but a smile and a quiet word of wisdom to those who passed by. They taught that the divine was present in every leaf, every stone, and every human heart. Their influence was like the scent of roses on the wind, subtle, pervasive, and sweet. In the evenings, they might gather the villagers together for a sohbet, a spiritual conversation where they spoke of the inner journey and the importance of finding peace within oneself. These gatherings were never loud or dogmatic. They were quiet, reflective spaces where the soul could breathe. The sound of their chanting, a low, rhythmic Allah. Allah was like the heartbeat of the night, a sound that grounded the community and reminded them of their place in the eternal order. The architecture of the homes in St reflected this same sense of simplicity and harmony with nature. Most houses were built with a foundation of stone, topped with walls of sun-dried mud, bricks, and heavy wooden beams. The roofs were often covered with a thick layer of earth and grass, which provided natural insulation against the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter. Inside, the rooms were arranged around a central hearth, the source of warmth and light. There was very little furniture. Instead, the floors were covered with layers of felt and hand-woven carpets, and low divans ran along the walls for sitting and sleeping. Everything was designed for comfort and communal living. A house was not just a shelter, it was a sanctuary, a place where the family could gather in the evening to share a meal and the stories of the day. The windows were small, designed to keep out the glare of the sun, and were often covered with intricate wooden lattice that cast beautiful, geometric shadows across the floors. Cuisine in this era was a celebration of the land's bounty. It was simple, hearty, and deeply nourishing. A typical meal might center around a pilaf of cracked wheat or rice, flavored with wild herbs and perhaps a bit of butter or fat from the sheep. There were stews of lentils and chickpeas, slow-cooked in earthenware pots until they were rich and savory. Meat was a luxury, reserved for special occasions or for welcoming honored guests, and was often prepared as kebab over an open flame or simmered with dried fruits like apricots and plums. Bread was the staff of life, baked daily in outdoor communal ovens or over the hearth. The sight of a woman pulling a long, golden loaf of ekmek or a stack of paper-thin yufka from the fire was a sign of a healthy and prosperous home. For dessert, there might be honey from the forest hives or sun-dried figs and walnuts. Eating was a slow, communal affair, done with the right hand while sitting on the floor, a time for gratitude and shared presence. The changing of the seasons brought a predictable and comforting shift in the tribe's activities. When the heat of summer began to fade into the cool, crisp air of autumn, the focus shifted to the harvest. The small fields of wheat and barley that were carved out of the valleys would turn a brilliant, waving gold. This was a time of intense but joyful labor. The entire community would head into the fields, the men scything the stalks with rhythmic swings, the women and children following behind to gather the sheaves. There was a sense of collective accomplishment in seeing the granaries fill with the golden grain that would sustain them through the winter. The air would be filled with the sound of laughter and singing, traditional harvest songs that had been sung for centuries. As the sun set on a day of harvesting, the workers would return to the village, tired but content, their clothing dusty and their hearts full. As autumn deepened, the trees on the hillsides, the oaks, the poplars, and the fruit trees in the orchards would turn brilliant shades of yellow, orange, and red. This was the time for gathering the wild bounty of the forests. The women and children would head into the woods to collect walnuts, chestnuts, and hazelnuts, as well as the wild herbs and berries that would be dried for the winter months. The forest was a place of mystery and abundance, its floor covered in a thick carpet of fallen leaves that crunched underfoot. The smell of decaying leaves and damp earth was a rich, heavy scent that spoke of the earth preparing for its rest. In the orchards, the last of the apples and pears would be picked, and the grapes would be pressed into pekmez, a thick, sweet syrup that was a staple of the winter diet. The process of making pekmez was a long, slow ritual, involving boiling the grape juice in large copper cauldrons over outdoor fires until it reached the perfect consistency. The steam from the cauldrons would rise into the cool evening air, carrying a scent that was unimaginably sweet and comforting. When the first snows of winter finally arrived, covering the Anatolian plateau in a pristine, white silence, the life of the tribe moved entirely indoors. The world outside became a landscape of white and gray, the mountains disappearing into the mists. This was the season of the hearth. The fires were kept burning day and night, their warmth reaching into every corner of the home. Winter was the time for the Uzengessler, the long nights of storytelling and music. The elders would take their places by the fire, and the children would gather around, their eyes wide with wonder as they heard the tales of Dietkorkut, the legendary bard of the Aegeus Turks. These stories were filled with wisdom, bravery, and the deep values of the tribe: loyalty to the family, respect for the earth, and the importance of honor. The voice of the storyteller would rise and fall, mimicking the sound of the wind or the galloping of horses, weaving a world of magic and memory in the small, firelit room. During these winter nights, the music of the tribe also took center stage. The kopis, a three-stringed lute with a skin-covered body, was the favorite instrument of the bards. Its sound was earthy and resonant, a perfect accompaniment to the epic poems of their people. A skilled musician could make the kopis speak, its notes evoking the wide-open spaces of the steppe and the rugged peaks of the Taurus. The music was never hurried. It was a slow, contemplative art that invited the listener to journey within. Sometimes, someone would bring out a ney, the reed flute of the Sufis, and its breathy, mournful tones would fill the room, bringing a sense of deep spiritual longing and peace. In the flickering light of the hearth, with the sound of the snow hitting the roof and the music filling the air, the boundaries between the past and the present seemed to dissolve, leaving only the timeless essence of the tribe. The children of Esti grew up in this world of rhythms and stories, their lives guided by the examples of their elders. They were given small responsibilities from a young age, tending the chickens, gathering firewood, or helping with the younger siblings. Their play was a reflection of the adult world. Boys would practice their archery with small wooden bows, and girls would learn to weave on tiny, handheld looms. There was no pressure to grow up quickly, but there was a steady, quiet expectation that they would contribute to the well-being of the whole. They were taught to respect the animals, the plants, and the elders, and to find joy in the simple things: a perfectly ripe peach, the first flower of spring, or a well-told story. They were the future of the Kayı, the ones who would carry the dream of the great tree forward into the next century. The interactions between the Kayı and the neighboring Byzantine territories were often complex, but largely centered on trade and local diplomacy. In the markets of towns like Bialchik, or even as far as Nicaea, Turkic nomads and Byzantine townspeople would mingle, exchanging wool, meat, and dairy products for silk, spices, and fine glassware. There was a pragmatic peace on the frontier, a recognition that both sides needed what the other had. While there were occasional skirmishes or raids, mostly small affairs involving grazing rights or the recovery of stolen livestock, they were rarely seen as part of a larger war. They were the friction of two cultures rubbing against each other, a natural part of frontier life. Leaders like Osman, and before him, Ertugrul, were skilled at navigating these relationships, often forming alliances with local Byzantine Tekfurs governors to maintain stability. This was a world of personal connections and local arrangements, where a man's word was his bond. Local governance within the Beylik was equally focused on consensus and justice. The Divan, or Council of Elders, would meet regularly to discuss matters of importance to the tribe. These meetings were held in a large tent or under the shade of a venerable tree, and everyone had the right to be heard. The goal was always to reach a decision that benefited the community as a whole, rather than any single individual. The leaders were not distant rulers. They were the first among equals, whose authority came from their wisdom, their bravery, and their ability to provide for their people. Justice was administered with a focus on restoration and peace, rather than punishment. A dispute over a piece of land or a debt would be settled through mediation, often with the help of a local religious leader or a Nahi elder. This commitment to fairness and local autonomy was what made the early Ottoman administration so attractive to the people of Anatolia, regardless of their background. The Ahes, whom we have seen before, were the pillars of the urban and town life that was beginning to emerge. In the small centers that were growing around St. the Ahi lodges were places of immense social and spiritual importance. They provided training for craftsmen, ensured the quality of goods, and acted as a social safety net for those in need. But more than that, they were centers of futua, the code of spiritual chivalry. An Ahi was expected to be brave in battle, but even more importantly, he was expected to be generous, humble, and honest in his daily life. Their gatherings in the lodges involved shared meals, the study of sacred texts, and the practice of spiritual music and dance. The presence of the Ahis gave the growing settlements a sense of moral purpose and social cohesion that was essential for their survival in a changing world. They were the quiet weavers of the social fabric, ensuring that, as the Beylik grew, it did not lose its soul. As the years passed, the small settlement of St began to feel more permanent, a place of stone and story that was rooted in the Anatolian earth. The orchards grew taller, the fields wider, and the population more diverse. Yet, the heart of the community remained the same. It was a place where the morning began with the call to prayer, and the evening ended with the warmth of the hearth. It was a place where the seasons were honored, and the ancestors were remembered. It was a place where a great dream was being nurtured in the quiet, everyday acts of living. The rise of the Ottomans was not a sudden explosion of power, but the slow, inevitable growth of a healthy organism. It was the growth of a tree that had found the perfect soil and the perfect climate, and whose roots were deep enough to weather any storm. The women's role in this growth cannot be overstated. Beyond their domestic duties, they were the keepers of the tribe's cultural identity. They were the ones who ensured that the language, the stories, and the spiritual practices were passed down to the children. They were also active participants in the economic life of the Beylik, managing the production of textiles and dairy products that were the mainstays of trade. In times when the men were away tending the flocks or guarding the borders, the women were the ones who held the settlement together, managing the fields and the households with a steady hand. Their strength was not loud or boastful. It was the quiet, enduring strength of the earth itself. When a new child was born into the tribe, it was the women who gathered to welcome it, their songs and prayers creating a circle of protection around the new life. This sense of feminine wisdom and resilience was a vital part of the foundation upon which the future empire would be built. As we linger in this peaceful era, we can see the figures of the leaders moving through their daily lives. Ertugrul, in his later years, could often be seen sitting on a wooden bench outside his home, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of a long and meaningful life. He would watch the children play, a gentle smile on his face, knowing that he had provided them with a place of safety and hope. Osman, his son, would often be found in the stables, his hands moving surely as he checked the health of a newborn foal. He was a man of action, yes, but also a man of deep reflection, who understood that the true strength of his leadership lay in his connection to his people and the land. He did not seek the titles or the trappings of power. He sought only to serve. These men were not the distant, golden-robed sultans of the later centuries. They were frontiersmen, leaders of a tribe, whose power was rooted in the respect and loyalty of their followers. The atmosphere of St was one of quiet anticipation, a feeling that they were on the verge of something significant, though no one could say exactly what. It was like the silence before a summer rain, when the air is heavy and the world is waiting for the first drop to fall. This anticipation was not a source of anxiety, but of purpose. It infused every task with a sense of importance, whether it was the carving of a wooden bowl, the repair of a stone wall, or the training of a young horse. It was done with the knowledge that it was contributing to the building of a home that would last. This sense of shared destiny was the true secret of their success. They were not just a collection of individuals. They were a community bound together by a common vision and a common heart. The geography of Anatolia, with its high plateaus and deep valleys, continued to offer places of sanctuary and retreat for the dervishes and the seekers. The mountain caves and the quiet forest clearings were places where they could connect with the divine in absolute silence. They would spend days in meditation, their only food the wild berries and nuts of the forest, their only company the wind and the stars. When they returned to the settlements, they brought with them a sense of peace and clarity that was infectious. They were the reminders that there was a world beyond the physical, a world of spirit and light that was just as real as the stone and the soil. Their presence ensured that, even as the Beylik grew in worldly power, it remained grounded in spiritual truth. The music of the ney, with its breathy, soulful tones, continued to be the soundtrack of this spiritual search. In the quiet hours of the night, when the rest of the village was asleep, the sound of the ney would drift through the air, a long, melancholic sigh that spoke of the soul's longing for its creator. It was a sound that seemed to pull the listener upward, away from the cares of the world, toward a place of pure, unadulterated peace. To hear the ney in the stillness of the Anatolian night was to experience the very essence of the Sufi Patha journey of love, of surrender, and of finding the divine in the quietest of places. As the morning mist began to clear from the valleys, the full beauty of the landscape was revealed. The silver green of the olive groves, the deep green of the pines, and the golden brown of the earth created a palette of colors that was both vibrant and calming. The air was filled with the sound of bird song, the sharp call of the hawk, the rhythmic cooing of the dove, and the cheerful chirping of the sparrows. Life was everywhere, in the smallest insect crawling across a leaf and the largest eagle soaring above the peaks. This abundance of life was a testament to the health of the land and the care with which the people treated it. They did not seek to dominate nature. They sought to live within it, taking only what they needed and giving back through their respect and their prayers. The market in Sate was a place of quiet, orderly exchange. Unlike the frantic, noisy bazaars of the larger cities, here the trade was conducted with a sense of dignity and fairness. Merchants from neighboring principalities, and even Byzantine traders, would set up small stalls, their goods laid out on colorful carpets. There were sacks of grain, jars of honey, rolls of wool, and beautiful copper vessels. The sound of negotiation was a low, polite murmur, often accompanied by the sharing of a cup of tea. There was no shouting, no aggressive salesmanship. A man's reputation for honesty was his most valuable asset, and trade was seen as a way of building relationships as much as a way of making a living. In this atmosphere of trust, the economy of the Beylik flourished, providing the resources needed for its gradual expansion. The children would often wander through the market, their eyes wide with curiosity at the sights and smells. They might see a dervish performing a simple, rhythmic dance in a corner, or a storyteller enthralling a group of listeners with a tale of the great steppe. These experiences were part of their education, teaching them about the diversity and the richness of their world. They learned that the world was a wide and wonderful place, but that their home was the center of it all. They felt the safety and the love of their community, a solid foundation upon which they could build their lives. As they grew, they would take their places in the fields, the workshops, and the councils, carrying the values of St into the future. The evening hours in the settlement were the most peaceful of all, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet, rose, and amber. The village would enter a state of deep, quiet reflection. The call to prayer would rise into the air, a beautiful, haunting melody that signaled the end of the day's labor. Families would gather in their homes, the glow of the hearth fire creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. The evening meal was a time of sharing and gratitude, a moment to reconnect after the day's activities. After the meal, the family might sit together for a while, the children playing quietly, the elders talking, and the music of the kopas, or the ney, providing a soothing background. This was the time for the akam sobeti, the evening conversation, where the wisdom of the day was distilled and shared. In these moments, the sense of time passing slowly was most palpable. There was no rush to the next day, no anxiety about the future. There was only the present moment, filled with the warmth of the fire, the love of the family, and the peace of the night. The rhythms of life in St. were the rhythms of the soul's low, deep, and meaningful. This was the true strength of the Kayı, the secret that allowed them to build an empire that would last for 6 centuries. It was not built on the battlefield, but in the heart of the home and the spirit of the community. It was built on the foundation of a life lived with integrity, compassion, and a deep connection to the divine. The natural environment of Anatolia, with its dramatic seasons and its rugged beauty, was the perfect backdrop for this unfolding story. Each mountain, each river, and each forest had its own character, its own story to tell. The people of the Beylik were the readers of these stories. Their lives intertwined with the landscape in a way that is hard for us to imagine today. They knew the language of the birds, the secrets of the plants, and the messages carried by the wind. They were not separate from nature. They were a part of it, a thread in the great tapestry of life. This connection gave them a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose that sustained them through the challenges of the frontier. As the night deepened, the village would fall into a profound silence. The only sounds were the crackle of the dying fires, the rustle of the wind in the trees, and the occasional soft whinny of a horse in the stables. The stars would come out in all their glory, a glittering canopy over the sleeping world. In this silence, the great dream of Osman seemed more real than ever. The tree was growing, its branches reaching out, its roots digging deep. It was a growth that could not be seen, but it could be felt in the peace and the order of the community. It was the growth of a future that was already present in the quiet, everyday acts of the people. The interactions with the Byzantine territories continued to be a source of both challenge and opportunity, while the borders were generally peaceful. The gradual decline of central Byzantine authority meant that local governors were often left to fend for themselves. This created a vacuum that leaders like Osman were able to fill, not through conquest, but by providing the stability and justice that the people craved. Many Byzantine peasants and townspeople began to see the Ottoman Beylik as a source of protection and a place where they could live and work in peace. This soft power was a key element in the early expansion of the state, as villages and towns would often choose to join the Beylik rather than fight it. The Ottoman model of governance, with its respect for local customs and its commitment to fairness, was a powerful magnet in a world that was often chaotic and fragmented. Trade remained the primary vehicle for these interactions. The Silk Road, which passed through Anatolia, brought goods and ideas from as far away as China and Europe. The caravanserais, those great stone fortresses of hospitality, were the waypoints of this trade. A merchant arriving at a caravanserai near St. would find a safe haven for himself and his animals, a place where he could rest and exchange news with travelers from every corner of the world. These buildings were masterpieces of architecture, their grand portals decorated with intricate stone carvings, their courtyards filled with the sounds of different languages and the smells of exotic spices. Inside, the atmosphere was one of quiet, cosmopolitan order, a reflection of the interconnected world in which the Beylik was growing. The role of the merchants was not just to trade goods, but to carry information. They were the ones who brought news of the developments in the east and the west, of the movements of the Mongols, and the changes in the Byzantine capital. This information was vital for leaders like Osman, allowing them to navigate the complex political landscape of the time. The merchants were the eyes and ears of the Beylik, their travels weaving together the different parts of the world into a single, interconnected whole. Their presence in the markets of St. brought a touch of the world's diversity to the small settlement, a reminder of the vast horizons that lay beyond the mountains. As we look closer at the daily life of the women in the tribe, we see a world of immense skill and quiet leadership. Beyond the weaving and the food preparation, the The women were often the primary healers of the community. They had a deep knowledge of the local flora, knowing which roots could stop a fever, which leaves could heal a wound, and which berries could soothe a cough. Their gardens were filled with medicinal herbs, lavender, mint, chamomile, and thyme, their scents creating a fragrant sanctuary around the home. A woman might spend her afternoon drying these herbs and preparing tinctures and salves, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who understands the mysteries of the natural world. This knowledge was passed down from mother to daughter, a secret language of care and compassion that was essential for the tribe's survival. The communal activities of the tribe were another source of strength and cohesion. Whether it was the building of a new house, the repairing of a bridge, or the celebration of a wedding, the entire community would come together to help. These activities were not just about getting the work done. They were about reinforcing the bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood. A house raising was a festive event, with the men doing the heavy lifting and the women providing the food and the encouragement. A wedding was a multi-day celebration, filled with music, dancing, and the sharing of a great feast. These events were the milestones of the tribe's life, the moments when they celebrated their shared identity and their commitment to each other. In the joy and the labor of these communal acts, the spirit of the Kayı was most clearly visible. The architecture of the mosques and the dervish lodges in the Beylik was characterized by a sense of understated beauty and spiritual focus. These buildings were often simple in their design, made of local stone and wood, but their proportions were perfect, creating a sense of balance and peace. The interiors were cool and quiet, the walls decorated with simple calligraphic inscriptions or geometric patterns. There were no elaborate statues or icons. The focus was entirely on the unseen, the divine presence that filled the space. To enter a mosque in Sant was to enter a world of stillness, where the only sound was the rustle of the prayer mats and the low murmur of the faithful. This architectural simplicity reflected the spiritual values of the community, a focus on the essential, a respect for the material, and a deep devotion to the divine. The influence of the Sufi orders, particularly the Bektashes and the Mevlevis, was pervasive. Their teachings emphasized the universality of the divine and the importance of inner transformation. The dervishes were the living embodiments of these teachings, their lives a testament to the power of love and humility. They were the bridges between the different cultures and faiths of Anatolia, their lodges open to all who sought the truth. Their presence ensured that the growing Beylik was not just a political entity, but a spiritual one as well, a place where the soul was as important as the state. This spiritual foundation was what gave the Ottoman system its unique character, its ability to integrate diverse peoples into a single, harmonious whole. The music of the ney, with its origins in the reed beds of the river, was the perfect symbol of this spiritual journey. The reed, once cut from its home and hollowed out, longs to return to the source, and its music is the expression of that longing. To hear the ney was to be reminded of one's own spiritual origin and the journey back to the divine. In the quiet evenings in Esti, the sound of the ney would rise above the sounds of the village, a call to the heart to remember its true home. It was a music that did not demand attention. It invited it, a soft, insistent whisper that spoke of the eternal peace that lies at the center of all things. The seasons continued their slow and beautiful dance. Spring would return to the plateau, the hills exploding in a riot of color as the wildflowers bloomed. The air would be filled with the scent of blossoming fruit trees and the sound of the birds returning from the south. This was the season of rebirth, a time of new beginnings and renewed hope. The tribe would prepare for the move to the summer pastures, their hearts light as they looked forward to the cool mountain air. The cycle of life would begin again, a reminder of the enduring presence of the earth and the faithfulness of the Creator. In the changing seasons, the people of the Beylik found a sense of order and meaning that grounded their lives and gave them the strength to face the future. The leader, Osman, now in the prime of his life, was the embodiment of this strength. He was a man who listened more than he spoke, who led by example rather than by decree. He could often be seen working alongside his people, whether it was in the fields during the harvest or in the stables with the horses. He was a man of the people, whose authority came from his integrity and his commitment to justice. He was the guardian of the dream, the one who ensured that the tree was nurtured and protected. His presence was a source of calm and reassurance, a steady hand on the rudder of the growing state. He was not a conqueror in the traditional sense. He was a builder, a man who saw the potential for a world built on the principles of peace and justice. As the years unfolded, the small settlements around St began to take on a life of their own, each one a little world of its own, yet all connected to the center. There was a sense of organic growth, a feeling that the state was expanding at exactly the right pace. There was no rush for empire, no desire for quick glory. Every step was taken with care, every alliance built on a foundation of mutual respect. This slow and steady approach was the secret of their endurance, the reason they were able to build something that would last for centuries. It was the growth of a forest, not a fire, slow, steady, and life-giving. The atmosphere of Anatolia, with its wide open spaces and its rugged beauty, continued to shape the character of the people. They were a people of the frontier, resilient, adaptable, and deeply spiritual. They had seen empires come and go, and they knew that the only thing that lasted was the earth and the spirit. This perspective gave them a sense of humility and a sense of purpose that were essential for their success. They were not just building a state, they were building a home, a place where their children and their children's children could live in peace. This was the heart of the Kayı dream, a dream that was being woven into the fabric of daily life, in seeing the interactions with the Byzantine territories were also shaped by this long-term perspective. While there were occasional skirmishes, the overarching goal was always to build a stable and peaceful frontier. This was done through personal relationships, trade, and a commitment to justice. The Ottoman Beylik was seen as a place where a man's word was his bond, where a merchant could trade without fear, and where a peasant could work the land without being burdened by excessive taxes. This reputation for fairness and stability was a powerful force, drawing people from all over the region to join the growing state. The expansion of the Beylik was not just a matter of territory. It was a matter of hearts and minds. As the sun set once again over the settlement of St. D, the world was bathed in a soft ethereal light. The mountains were silhouetted against a sky of deep violet and gold, and the river was a shimmering silver ribbon. The village was entering its evening rest, the fires glowing in the hearths, the families gathering together. The sound of the neigh drifted through the air, a long, peaceful sigh that seemed to touch the very soul of the landscape. In this moment, the beauty of the world and the peace of the community were one and the same. The history of the Ottomans was continuing its slow and steady march, but here, in the heart of St. the only thing that mattered was the present moment, filled with the warmth of the fire and the love of the family. The story of the Kayı is a story of quiet heroism, of the strength found in the everyday acts of living. It is a story of a people who knew how to live in harmony with the earth and with each other. It is a story of a dream that was nurtured in the silence of the mountains and the warmth of the hearth. As we linger in this peaceful era, let us take inspiration from their example, finding our own place of rest and purpose in the rhythms of our lives. The great tree is growing, its branches reaching out, its roots digging deep. It is a journey of 1,000 years, and it is just beginning. The natural world of Anatolia, with its forests and its mountains, was a source of endless wonder and sustenance. The forests were filled with oak, pine, and cedar, their tall trunks reaching toward the sky, their branches providing a home for the birds and the wild animals. The mountain slopes were covered in alpine meadows, their colors changing with the seasons. The people of the Beylik were the stewards of this beauty. their lives guided by a deep respect for the environment. They knew that the health of the community was dependent on the health of the land, and they treated it with the care and the reverence it deserved. This connection to nature was a vital part of their spiritual life, a reminder of the divine presence in all things. The daily activities of the children, as they learned the ways of the tribe, were a sign of the continuity of their culture. They were the future keepers of the stories, the music, and the traditions. Their education was not a matter of books and classrooms, but of observation and experience. They learned to read the signs of the seasons, to understand the needs of the animals, and to find their way through the mountains. They learned the value of hard work, the importance of honesty, and the power of compassion. They were the ones who would carry the legacy of Osman and Ertugrul into the next century, ensuring that the dream of the great tree would never fade. The communal activities, the hymns and the celebrations, were the moments when the spirit of the tribe was most clearly visible. In the joy of a wedding or the labor of a harvest, the people were reminded that they were a part of something much larger than themselves. They were a community, bound together by a common history and a common heart. This sense of belonging was the true secret of their resilience, the reason they were able to face the challenges of the frontier with such grace and courage. They were not alone. They had each other, and they had the land, and they had the divine. As the morning mist began to rise once again from the valleys, the world was reborn in a soft, golden light. The day's activities were beginning, the fires being kindled, the animals being led to pasture. The sound of the rope creaking at the rhythmic clack of the loom, and the bright song of the blacksmith's hammer were the music of the morning. In this quiet, orderly world, the history of the Ottomans was being written in the everyday acts of living. It was a history of peace, of growth, and of a deep and abiding connection to the land. The journey was long, but the path was clear, and the destination was a world of justice and harmony. In the center of the settlement, under the shade of a great plane tree, a group of elders sat in quiet conversation. They spoke of the past, of the long journey from the east, and of the heroes who had guided them. They spoke of the future, of the growth of the Beylik, and the dreams of their children. Their voices were low and steady, their faces reflecting the wisdom of a lifetime of experience. They were the anchors of the community, the ones who provided the perspective and the guidance needed for the journey. As they sat together in the cool shade, with the sounds of the village all around them, they were a reminder of the enduring power of story and the strength of the human spirit. The landscape of Anatolia, with its wide-open plateaus and its rugged mountains, was the perfect stage for this unfolding drama. Each hill, each valley, and each river was a part of the story, a character in its own right. The people of the Beylik were the dancers on this stage, their lives guided by the rhythms of the earth and the movements of the stars. They were in harmony with the world, their hearts beat in sync with the pulse of the land. This connection was what gave them their strength, their resilience, and their peace. It was a connection that was nurtured in the silence of the mountains, in the warmth of the hearth, a connection that would last for centuries. The dervishes, in their quiet lodges and their wandering travels, were the reminders of the spiritual dimension of this journey. They taught that the world was a garden, and that each person was a gardener responsible for the beauty of their own soul. They showed that the divine was present in every breath, every act of kindness, and every moment of stillness. Their influence ensured that the growing Beylik remained a place of spiritual light, even as it grew in worldly power. They were the weavers of the inner fabric, the ones who ensured that the heart of the community was always focused on the eternal. As the seasons turned, the people of the Beylik remained focused on the simple truths of their lives. They worked the land, tended the animals, and cared for each other. They honored the traditions of their ancestors and looked forward to the future of their children. They found joy in the small things, the taste of a fresh loaf of bread, the sound of a well-played flute, the sight of a clear morning sky. This was the true success of the Kayı, the reason they were able to build an empire that was both powerful and humane. It was built on the foundation of a life lived with integrity, compassion, and a deep connection to the divine. The interactions with the neighboring principalities continued to be a source of stability and shared culture. In the markets and the caravanserais, the people of the different beyliks mingled, exchanging goods and stories. They were part of a larger Turkic world, a world of shared language, faith, and traditions. This shared culture was the glue that held the region together, even in times of political fragmentation. It was the basis for the hidden alliances and the quiet cooperation that would one day lead to the unification of Anatolia under the Ottoman banner. The rise of the state was not just the work of one tribe, it was the work of a whole people, united by a common heart. As the evening shadows lengthened once again, the settlement of St was filled with a sense of profound peace. The call to prayer rose into the air, a beautiful, haunting melody that signaled the end of the day. The fires were glowing in the hearths, the families gathering together. The sound of the ney drifted through the air, a long, peaceful sigh that seemed to touch the very soul of the landscape. In this moment, the beauty of the world and the peace of the community were one and the same. The history of the Ottomans was continuing its slow and steady march. But here, in the heart of St, the only thing that mattered was the present moment, filled with the warmth of the fire and the love of the family. The story of the early Ottoman period is a journey into the heart of a culture that valued the simple, the essential, and the spiritual. It is a journey through a landscape of immense beauty and rugged strength. It is a journey that invites us to slow down, to breathe, and to find our own place in the great, unfolding story of the world. As we linger in the peace of St, let us carry the lessons of the Kayı with us, the importance of integrity, the power of compassion, and the beauty of a life lived in harmony with nature and the divine. The great tree is growing, its branches reaching out, its roots digging deep. The journey continues, one quiet step at a time, toward a future that is as vast and as beautiful as the Anatolian sky. The mid-afternoon sun hung like a heavy golden coin over the hills surrounding St, casting long slumberous shadows that reached across the valley floor. In these hours, the world seemed to hold its breath, caught in a state of warm, golden suspension, where the only movement was the shimmering of the heat haze over the golden wheat fields and the slow, rhythmic swaying of the tall poplars by the riverbank. The air was thick with the scent of sun-baked earth, drying hay, and the sharp resinous perfume of the pine forests that guarded the higher ridges. Everything in the Kayı settlement moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace, as if the people themselves had become attuned to the slow, geological pulse of the Anatolian plateau. The elders sat in the dappled shade of the great plane trees, their wooden prayer beads clicking softly, a sound like the distant tapping of a woodpecker, while they watched the younger generation go about their chores with a quiet, focused industry. There was no need for loud voices or frantic movement. The patterns of their lives had been etched into the landscape over decades, and each person knew their place within the grand, unfolding tapestry of the tribe's existence. Near the stables, the sound of a brush against a horse's coat created a steady, rasping rhythm, a soothing percussion that blended with the buzzing of cicadas in the grass. A young groom, his movements fluid and patient, worked on a sturdy bay stallion, the animal's muscles rippling under a coat that shone like burnished copper. The horse stood perfectly still, its head lowered, eyes half closed in a state of equine contentment. This bond between the nomad and his mount was a silent language of trust, built through years of shared journeys and cold nights under the stars. The groom spoke to the animal in a low, melodic whisper, a string of nonsense words and soft clicks that seemed to vibrate in the still air. Every few moments, he would pause to pat the horse's neck, his hand lingering against the warm skin, acknowledging the life and spirit of the creature that was so central to their identity. This was not just work. It was a ritual of care, a daily acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of all living things in this high, wild land. Further toward the center of the village, the communal kitchen areas were alive with the gentle sounds of food preparation. The women were beginning to prepare the evening meal, their hands moving with an effortless skill that spoke of 1,000 such afternoons. Large, flat stones were heated over small, controlled fires fueled by dried brush and dung, the smoke rising in thin blue ribbons that curled lazily toward the sky. On these stones, they spread thin circles of dough, which would soon puff up and brown into fragrant yufka bread. The scent of toasted flour and yeast began to drift through the lanes, a warm and inviting aroma that signaled the transition from the heat of the day to the cooling embrace of the evening. Nearby, large copper cauldrons simmered with a stew of lentils, onions, and wild herbs gathered from the mountain-sides, thyme, sage, and a hint of mint. The bubbling of the pots was a soft, liquid song, a promise of nourishment and comfort for the families when they returned from the fields and pastures in the higher reaches of the slopes. The shepherds began to gather their flocks, the distant tinkling of sheep bells sounding like a scattering of silver coins across the landscape. The movement of the sheep was like a slow white tide flowing down the hillside, the animals stopping occasionally to nibble on a stray patch of clover or a cluster of wild herbs. The shepherds moved with them, their long wooden staffs clicking against the stones, their whistles soft and directional. This was the hour of the homeward journey, a time of reflection and quiet satisfaction. The dogs, large and vigilant, with their thick, cream-colored coats, prowled the edges of the flock, their presence a silent assurance of safety. There was a profound peace in this movement, a sense that the world was right and that the ancient cycle of the day was nearing its natural conclusion. The light was changing now, turning from a harsh white to a soft, honeyed amber that smoothed the rugged edges of the cliffs and made the river appear like a vein of molten gold. As the sun touched the crest of the western mountains, the village of St seemed to glow from within. The stone walls of the small mosque and the timber frames of the houses caught the dying light, reflecting a warmth that was both physical and spiritual. This was the hour when Ertugrul, the venerable leader, would often step out from his home to sit on a low stone wall, his eyes fixed on the horizon. His presence was like a calm anchor in the shifting currents of the frontier. He did not need to issue commands. His very existence was a testament to the endurance and wisdom of the Kayı. He watched the returning workers with a gaze that was both sharp and incredibly kind, seeing in each face the story of their ancestors and the promise of their children. To him, the settlement was not just a collection of buildings, but a living, breathing entity, a grove of human souls that he had been tasked to protect and nurture. He felt the coolness of the evening air on his skin, a welcome relief after the heat, and he breathed in the scent of the coming night, a mixture of damp earth, wood smoke, and the faint, sweet smell of the jasmine that climbed the walls of his courtyard. A wandering merchant, having traveled the long road from the Byzantine city of Nicaea, arrived at the edge of the village, leading a string of heavily laden mules. The clatter of the mules' hooves on the stony path was a new sound in the evening quiet, but it was not a disruptive one. The merchant was a familiar figure, a man who brought news of the wider world and goods that were not easily found in the hills. He was welcomed with the customary hospitality that was the hallmark of the Turkic tribes. Before any business was discussed, he was led to a shaded area and offered a cup of cool water and a plate of dried fruits. He sat with a sigh of relief, his dusty clothes a map of his long journey through the mountain passes and across the dusty plains. He spoke softly of the sights he had seen, the high walls of the cities, the bustling markets, and the ships that sailed the turquoise waters of the sea. His stories were like windows into other worlds, and the children who gathered at a respectful distance listened with wide wondering eyes. But even as he spoke of grand cities and distant empires, he looked around at the peaceful simplicity of St with a sense of envy, recognizing the rare and precious tranquility that the Kayı had managed to cultivate in the dervish lodge. The atmosphere was one of profound stillness. The interior was cool and dim, the only light coming from a few small oil lamps that cast flickering shadows on the whitewashed walls. A group of seekers sat in a circle on the woven carpets, their heads bowed in silent meditation. The air was heavy with the scent of burning agar wood, a deep, earthy fragrance that seemed to slow the heartbeat and clear the mind. This was the practice of dhikr, the remembrance of the divine, performed in the silence of the heart. Occasionally, the silence would be broken by the soft, breathy notes of a ney flute, the music rising and falling like a long, mournful sigh. The ney, made from a simple reed, was the voice of the soul longing for its source, and its music was a bridge between the material world and the realm of the spirit. The listeners felt themselves drifting on these notes, their worries and attachments falling away like autumn leaves. This spiritual grounding was the invisible foundation of the tribe's strength, providing them with a sense of purpose and a peace that could not be shaken by the uncertainties of the frontier. The women of the tribe, having finished the initial preparations for dinner, gathered in small groups to continue their needlework by the fading light. Their needles moved with a rhythmic precision, creating intricate patterns of vines, flowers, and ancient tribal symbols on the hems of garments and the edges of scarves. This was a time for quiet conversation, for the sharing of family news and the passing down of grandmotherly wisdom. A young mother sat with her infant, rocking the child in a wooden cradle carved with protective charms. The rhythmic creak-creak of the cradle was a lullaby that had been heard in these tents and houses for generations. She sang a low, wordless tune, her voice blending with the evening sounds of the village. There was a sense of profound continuity in this scene, a feeling that the essential tasks of life, nurturing, creating, and remembering, were being performed with a sacred attention that transcended the passage of time. As the first stars began to pierce the velvet blue of the sky, the village transitioned to the intimacy of the hearth. Families gathered around the low tables, the flickering firelight reflecting in their eyes. The meal was shared with a sense of gratitude, each piece of bread broken with a blessing, each sip of water acknowledged as a gift. They spoke of the day's work, the quality of the grain, the health of the foals, and the signs of the coming autumn. There was no talk of grand conquests or political intrigue. Their world was measured by the success of the harvest and the well-being of their neighbors. This was the ordinary heroism of the frontier, the daily commitment to hard work, the steady practice of faith, and the unwavering loyalty to one's community. It was a life lived close to the bone, but it was a life that was rich in meaning and saturated with peace. After the meal, the elders would often recount the stories of the tribe's journey from the Far East. The first gray light of a late autumn morning began to lift the heavy veil of darkness from the valleys around St., revealing a landscape transformed by a thin, shimmering layer of frost. The air was remarkably still, brittle and cold, carrying the sharp, clean scent of damp earth and the first hints of wood smoke as the early risers began to breathe life into the hearths. Within the settlement, the transition from sleep to waking was a slow, muted process. There were no sudden movements or loud calls. Instead, there was the soft, rhythmic sound of flint striking steel, the gentle rustle of wool blankets being folded, and the quiet, low-pitched murmurs of families greeting the day. The frost clung to the edges of the felt tents and silvered the wooden beams of the more permanent stone dwellings, making the entire village look as though it had been dusted with crushed diamonds. This was the season of the long shadows and the shortening days, a time when the pulse of the tribe slowed further still, drawing inward toward the warmth and light of the communal fires. Near the central gathering area, the village elders were already beginning their morning walk, their heavy wool cloaks wrapped tightly around them. Their boots crunched softly on the frozen ground, a steady, grounding sound in the silence. They walked with a measured pace, their eyes scanning the horizon for the subtle signs of weather that only those who had lived 8 decades on the plateau could read. To them, the sky was not just a canopy, but a vast, living scroll. The way the clouds gathered behind the northern peaks, or the particular hue of the dawn told them of the coming winter's depth. They spoke little, for, at this age, silence was a shared language of understanding. When they did speak, their voices were like the rustle of dry leaves, soft, weathered, and full of the weight of history. They were the living memory of the Kayı, the anchors who ensured that, even as the world around them shifted, the soul of the tribe remained as steady as the mountains in the stables. The horses exhaled long, white plumes of breath into the chilly air. The young boys of the tribe, assigned to the care of the animals, moved among them with a gentle, drowsy efficiency. They checked at the hooves for stones and offered handfuls of dried mountain grass, their small hands disappearing into the thick winter coats of the mares. There was a profound quietude in the relationship between these children and the animals they tended. They were learning, through touch and observation, the unspoken rules of the frontier, that patience is the greatest tool, and that a calm hand can soothe even the most restless spirit. The horses leaned their heads against the boys' shoulders, their large dark eyes reflecting the growing light of the sun. This was the foundation of their education, a lesson in responsibility and connection that preceded any training in archery or governance. In the simple act of feeding a horse on a cold morning, the seeds of the tribe's future resilience were being sown. As the sun climbed higher, breaking over the jagged ridges to the east, the frost began to melt, turning the silver landscape back into the deep, rich browns and greens of the Anatolian earth. The sound of melting ice dripping from the eaves was a rhythmic, liquid music, a reminder of the constant state of flux that defined their world. In the workshops, the weavers returned to their looms, though their work now took on a different character. During these colder months, they focused on the heavier wools, creating thick rugs and heavy cloaks designed to withstand the biting winds of the plateau. The patterns they chose were reflective of the season-deep maroons, dark ochres, and the natural grays of the uncolored wool. Every knot tied was a testament to endurance. A woman might sit at her loom for hours, her mind wandering through the stories of her youth, while her fingers worked with an independent, mechanical wisdom. The thumb slide of the loom's comb was the heartbeat of the home, a sound that meant safety, warmth, and the continuation of the family line. In the dervish lodge, the morning session of meditation had just concluded. The seekers emerged into the pale sunlight, their faces carrying an expression of deep, internal peace. Among them was a traveling Sufi from the distant city of Kayı, a man who carried the teachings of Rumi in his heart like a burning coal. He sat by the lodge's small stone fountain, which was now partially frozen, and began to play a low, haunting melody on a wooden flute. The music did not demand attention. It drifted through the village like the scent of baking bread, a subtle invitation to pause and reflect. To the people of Saint, the dervish was a vital part of the social fabric. He was the reminder that the physical labor of the daitha, tilling of the soil, the herding of the sheep, was but one half of a whole life. The other half was the cultivation of the inner garden, the pursuit of a stillness that could not be disturbed by the noise of the world. As he played, a few villagers stopped their work for a moment, closing their eyes and allowing the music to wash over them, a brief sanctuary of spirit. In the midst of their daily rounds, the kitchen areas were now bustling with the preparation of the midday meal. This was a communal time, where the boundaries between households softened. Large iron pots were hung over the outdoor pits, filled with a hearty soup of cracked wheat, sun-dried tomatoes, and the last of the autumn's root vegetables. The women shared news of their children and the progress of their winter stores, their laughter a bright, silver thread in the cold air. They were the keepers of the tribe's vitality, managing the complex logistics of food preservation that would ensure the community's survival until the spring. They dried strips of meat in the wind, stored jars of honey from the high forest hives, and buried baskets of apples and pears in cool, underground pits. There was a quiet, ordinary heroism in this foresight. It was not a grand gesture, but a steady, day-to-day commitment to the well-being of the collective. Their wisdom was practical and grounded, yet it was infused with a deep sense of the sacredness of the nourishment they provided in the fields. The men were finishing the last of the seasonal preparations. The soil, now hardened by the cold, was being turned one last time to prepare it for the winter rest. They moved with a slow, synchronized rhythm, the oxen leaning into their yokes with a steady, powerful grace. There was a sense of completion in their work, a feeling that the debt to the land had been paid for another year. They spoke of the yield of the grain and the health of the orchards, their voices reflecting a deep-seated satisfaction. They were not just farmers. They were the stewards of a fragile and beautiful ecosystem. They knew every fold in the hills and every hidden spring, and they treated the land with the reverence one might show a venerable elder. This connection to the earth was the source of their stability, a constant reminder that they were part of a cycle that had begun long before them and would continue long after they were gone. A small group of scouts returned from a routine journey to the western border, their horses moving at a leisurely walk. They brought no news of conflict, only reports of the quiet state of the Byzantine frontier. They spoke of meeting a group of Greek shepherds in the high passes, and how they had shared a fire and a meal of cheese and bread. In this borderland, the realities of life often transcended the divisions of empire. The scouts described the beauty of the western forests, where the leaves were still clinging to the branches in a final, defiant display of gold and crimson. They spoke of the clarity of the mountain streams and the abundance of game. Their journey had been a meditation on the landscape, a slow exploration of the terrain that they were coming to call home. This scouting was not an act of aggression, but an act of acquaintance, a way of mapping the world not just with lines on a page, but with memories and experiences. As the short afternoon began to fade toward twilight, the village transitioned once more toward the intimacy of the evening. The cold intensified, the air becoming crisp and sharp. In the central hall, the fire was stoked until it roared, casting a warm, dancing light across the faces of those gathered. This was the hour of the storyteller. An old man, his skin as wrinkled as a sun-dried fig, took his place on the elevated dais. He began to tell a tale of the great steppe, of the time when the sky was a different color and the horizons were even wider than they were here. His voice was melodic and rhythmic, rising and falling with the drama of the narrative. The children sat at his feet, their eyes reflecting the flames, transported by his words to a world of myth and memory. These stories were the thread that bound the generations together, a way of ensuring that the identity of the Kayı remained intact even as they adapted to their new environment in Anatolia. The story was not just entertainment. It was a map of their soul, a reminder of the values of courage, hospitality, and faith that had guided them through the centuries. The meal was served in the gathering dark, a simple but satisfying fare that warmed the body and the spirit. They ate in a state of quiet companionship, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the low murmur of conversation. After the meal, a group of musicians brought out their instruments, the long-necked saz and the wooden keymans. The music they played was slow and soulful, a reflection of the landscape they inhabited. It was a music of the mountains and the plains, of longing and of peace. The notes seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with a deep, earthy resonance. Some of the younger men and women began to move in a slow, circular dance, their steps synchronized with the pulse of the music. It was a dance of community, a way of physically expressing their connection to each other and to the land. There was no ego in their movements, only a shared sense of joy and belonging. In the dervish lodge, the night was dedicated to the Sema, a ritual of spiritual whirling that was a physical manifestation of the soul's journey toward the divine. The dervishes, dressed in their long white robes and tall conical hats, began to turn slowly, their arms outstretched like the wings of a bird. The movement was hypnotic and fluid, a silent prayer in motion. To the observer, they looked like white flowers blooming in the darkness. This practice was the pinnacle of their spiritual life, a way of transcending the limitations of the physical world and finding a point of absolute stillness in the center of the turning. The silence in the lodge was profound, broken only by the soft brush of their feet on the carpets and the occasional sigh of the neigh. This spiritual core was what gave the tribe its inner strength, a resilience that was not based on physical power, but on a deep and abiding connection to the eternal outside. The stars appeared one by one, a vast and glittering canopy over the sleeping world. The constellations were the same ones that had guided their ancestors, a constant and unchanging presence in a world of transition. The river murmured in the distance, its voice a low, constant hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. The village of Saint was now fully at rest, the fires reduced to glowing embers, the families tucked under their heavy wool blankets. There was a sense of profound safety in this stillness, a feeling that they were held in the palm of a great and benevolent hand. The challenges of the frontier were many, but they were faced with a quiet and unwavering confidence. They knew who they were, where they had come from, and where they were going. As the night deepened, a lone wolf howled from the distant ridge, a long, melancholic sound that echoed through the valley. It was not a sound of threat, but a reminder of the wild and beautiful world that surrounded them. The Kayı respected the wolf as a fellow traveler in the wilderness, a creature of strength and cunning that shared their landscape. The sound only served to deepen the silence that followed, a silence that was rich and thick with the presence of the past. In this space, the dreams of the sleepers were filled with the images of their daily lives, the golden wheat, the copper horses, the faces of their loved ones. They were dreaming the dream of the tribe, a collective vision of a future built on the foundations of peace and justice. The seasons continued their slow, inevitable turn. In the weeks that followed, the first true snow began to fall, not as a storm, but as a gentle, persistent dusting that covered the world in a pristine, white silence. The village became a landscape of soft edges and muted colors. The daily routines shifted entirely indoors. The men spent their time repairing tools and carving wooden bowls, while the women focused on the intricate needlework that was their pride. There was a beauty in this winter seclusion, a chance to slow down and reflect on the events of the year. They spent more time in conversation, sharing stories and wisdom, the bonds of the community growing even stronger in the close quarters of the winter homes. During this time, the diplomacy of the frontier continued in a quieter, more personal form. Messengers from neighboring beyliks would arrive, their horses tired and their cloaks heavy with snow. They were welcomed into the warmth of the hearth, offered hot tea and a place to rest. They brought news of births and marriages, of the health of distant relatives, and of the state of the mountain passes. These small exchanges were the lifeblood of the frontier's social network. They were the way that a common culture was maintained across the fragmented landscape of Anatolia. The Kayı were seen as a point of stability and hospitality, a place where a traveler could always find a warm welcome and a fair hearing. This reputation was more valuable than any fortress or army, for it was built on the enduring foundations of trust and respect. The children of the tribe found great joy in the snow, their laughter ringing through the quiet streets as they played games of skill and endurance. They learned to track the animals in the snow, to read the stories written by the paws of the hare and the hooves of the deer. This was another part of their education, a lesson in the interconnectedness of all life. They saw that even in the dead of winter, the world was alive and moving. They learned to find the beauty in the barren landscape, the subtle colors of the winter sky and the intricate patterns of the frost. They were growing up with a deep and abiding love for the land, a love that would sustain them throughout their lives. In the dervish lodge, the winter was a time of even deeper study and meditation. The seekers spent long hours reading the works of the great Sufi masters, their voices a low, rhythmic murmur in the quiet rooms. They discussed the nature of the soul and the path to divine love. Their conversations a bridge between the physical world and the realm of the spirit. The dervish from Kayı remained with them, his presence a source of inspiration and guidance. He taught them the art of the ney and the poetry of Rumi, his words falling like gentle rain on the thirsty soil of their hearts. This spiritual nourishment was the true heat of the winter, a warmth that could not be extinguished by the coldest wind. As the winter solstice approached, the tribe prepared for a quiet celebration of the return of the light. They decorated their homes with boughs of evergreen and lit extra candles, a symbolic act of hope and resilience. There was no grand ceremony, just a shared sense of gratitude for the life they had and the community they belonged to. They broke bread together and shared the last of the autumn's fruit, their hearts full of the promise of the coming spring. They knew that the winter was far from over, but they faced it with a quiet and unwavering confidence. They were the Kayı, the people of the dream, and they were at home in the heart of Anatolia. The landscape outside remained a world of white and gray, the mountains hidden in the mists, but within the walls of Saint there was a vibrancy and a warmth that was irrepressible. It was the warmth of a culture that valued the human spirit above all else, a culture that found beauty in the ordinary and sacredness in the everyday. As the snow continued to fall, the village drifted into a state of deep, restorative peace. The journey of the tribe was a long one, but they were traveling it with a steady and patient grace. They were moving toward a future that was still hidden in the mists of time, but they were moving toward it together. Their hearts beat in sync with the pulse of the earth. The river, though partially frozen at the edges, continued to flow in the center, a dark and powerful current that never ceased. It was a reminder of the persistence of life, the way that the spirit continues to move, even when the world seems to be at a standstill. The people of Saint listened to the voice of the river in the night, a sound that was both comforting and profound. It was the voice of history, the voice of the land, and the voice of the divine, all joined in a single, eternal song. And in that song, they found the peace and the strength they needed to face the coming dawn. The weeks passed, and the first signs of the coming change began to appear. The days grew imperceptibly longer, the sun gaining a fraction more strength each day. The snow began to recede from the lower slopes, revealing the dark, expectant earth. The air, while still cold, carried a new scent, the scent of damp soil and the first stirrings of life beneath the surface. The village of St began to wake from its winter slumber, the pace of life picking up as the people prepared for the work of the spring. The horses were led out into the pale sunlight, their coats shaggy and their eyes bright. The elders watched the sky with a new intensity, waiting for the first return of the migratory birds. The transition from winter to spring was as slow and deliberate as every other change in their world. It was a process of gradual unfolding, a series of small, quiet miracles, a single wildflower blooming in a sheltered crag, the first buds appearing on the willow trees by the river, the return of the eagles to the high peaks. These were the events that defined the changing of the seasons. There was no rush, no urgency. They moved with the rhythm of the earth, their hearts in tune with the slow and beautiful dance of nature. They were the children of the plateau, and they knew that the best things in life take time to grow. As the first true warmth of the spring sun touched the valley, the village was filled with a sense of renewed energy and hope. The doors and windows of the homes were thrown open, allowing the fresh air to circulate. The sounds of the spring, the rushing of the meltwater, the singing of the birds, the bleating of the newborn lambs, created a vibrant and joyful symphony. The people of St stepped out into the world with a sense of gratitude and anticipation. They were ready for the challenges and the joys of the new year, their spirits strengthened by the peace and the stillness of the winter. The journey of the Kayı was continuing, a slow and steady march through the landscapes of history. They were building a world one day at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one prayer at a time. They were the weavers of a great tapestry, the growers of a great tree, the keepers of a great dream. The transition from the deep, silver-white silence of winter into the first tentative breaths of spring was a slow and gentle awakening for the lands around St. It was not a sudden burst of energy, but a gradual softening of the earth, a rhythmic dripping of meltwater from the high ridges of the mountains that sounded like a slow, watery pulse against the stones. The air, which had been brittle and sharp for so many months, began to carry a new wet, damp, fertile scent of waking soil, crushed pine needles, and the very first hints of wild hyacinth hidden in the sheltered crags of the hills. For the people of the Kayı, this change in the wind was a call to begin the ancient cycle of movement once more. In the early morning hours, before the sun had even cleared the jagged eastern peaks, the settlement was alive with a quiet, purposeful industry that felt more like a meditation than a chore. The smoke from the hearths rose straight and true into a pale violet sky, and the only sounds were the soft lowing of cattle and the melodic clink of wooden yokes being fitted with practiced, gentle hands. As the sun began to cast its first long, honey-colored rays across the valley, the village revealed itself as a place of harmony and profound order. The stone houses and felt tents seemed to grow naturally out of the landscape, their colors mirroring the ochre and gray of the Anatolian earth. Near the edge of the rushing stream, which was now swollen and boisterous with the mountain's winter gift, the women gathered to wash the heavy wool blankets and winter cloaks. The sound of their wooden beaters against the wet fabric was a rhythmic, grounding percussion, echoing the heartbeat of the land. They worked with a slow grace, their sleeves rolled up, their voices low and melodic as they hummed songs of the great steppe songs that had traveled thousands of miles and hundreds of years to settle here in these hills. There was no sense of rush. They understood that the water would take its own time to cleanse, and the sun would take its own time to dry. Every movement was a prayer of gratitude for the return of the warmth, a celebration of the resilience that had carried them through the frost in the higher pastures. The shepherds were already leading the flocks toward the lower slopes where the first tender shoots of grass were beginning to push through the receding snow. The movement of the sheep was like a slow white cloud drifting across the face of the mountain, a collective entity guided by the soft whistles of the men and the silent, watchful presence of the great Anatolian shepherd dogs. These dogs, with their thick, cream-colored coats and spiked collars, moved with a majestic, heavy-limbed confidence, their eyes never leaving the horizon. The shepherds carried their long wooden staffs, the grain of the wood polished smooth by years of use, and in the quiet of the afternoon, one would often hear the haunting, breathy notes of a gaval flute. The music was a thin, silver thread that seemed to tie the earth to the sky, a melody of longing and contentment that settled the hearts of both man and beast. It was in these high, lonely places that the soul of the nomad found its true reflection, in the vastness of the horizon and the absolute clarity of the mountain air. Down in the fertile valleys, the farmers were beginning the work of the plow. The soil here was dark and rich, a legacy of centuries of silt brought down by the rivers. The oxen, massive and patient, leaned into their harnesses, their breath creating small clouds of mist in the cool morning air. The men walked behind the wooden plows, their hands steady on the handles, feeling the vibration of the earth as it was turned over to face the sun. This was a sacred conversation between the people and the land. Every furrow was an act of hope, every seed a commitment to the future. They spoke to the oxen in low, encouraging tones, a language of mutual respect and shared labor. As the day progressed, the smell of the turned earth cool, sweet and ancient filled the valley, a scent that promised bread and life for the months to come. There was a quiet heroism in this steady, repetitive work, a persistence that was far more powerful than the transient glory of a battlefield. As the weeks passed and the spring deepened, St became a crossroads for travelers and neighbors alike, from the small, hidden villages of the mountains and the larger, stone-walled towns of the Byzantine frontier. People came to trade and share news. The market area was a place of soft-spoken negotiation and genuine hospitality. A merchant from the west might bring fine silks and jars of olive oil, while a nomad from the east offered hand-woven saddlebags and the finest mountain honey. They would sit together on low wooden benches under the shade of a budding plane tree, sharing small cups of bitter coffee and pieces of dried fruit. In these interactions, the borders of empires seemed thin and inconsequential. They spoke of the health of the vineyards, the price of wool, and the rumors of distant storms. This soft expansion of the Kayı influence was built not on conquest, but on the enduring foundations of trust, fairness, and the shared needs of the common people. One afternoon, a small group of dervishes arrived from the south, their long wool robes dusty from the road, their faces radiant with a quiet, internal joy. They were welcomed into the village with the reverence reserved for spiritual kin. In the evening, as the stars began to appear in the deep indigo vault of the sky, the community gathered in the central lodge to listen to their teachings. The head dervish, a man of great age and even greater stillness, spoke of the world as a mirror of the divine. He spoke of the importance of the inner migration, the journey the soul must take to find its true home in the heart of God. His voice was like a slow, deep river, carrying the listeners away from their daily worries and toward a place of absolute peace. Just as the river does not seek the sea with haste, but finds it through the grace of the path, he whispered, so the heart finds its rest not through effort, but through surrender. The music that followed was a blend of the sacred and the earthly. The nave flute, with its hollow, breathy voice, told the story of the reeds longing for the riverbed from which it was cut. The small drums, the kudum, provided a heartbeat, a steady thump-thump, that grounded the ethereal melody. Some of the villagers began to sway, and a few of the younger dervishes began to turn, their white skirts billowing out like the petals of a flower. This was not a performance, but a communal prayer, a physical manifestation of the harmony they sought to live by. The flickering lamplight cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, and for a few hours, the small village of St felt like the very center of the universe, a place where the physical and the spiritual were perfectly entwined. The scent of burning amber and sandalwood lingered in the air long after the music had stopped, a fragrant memory of the divine presence. The children of the tribe, tucked away in their wool blankets, listened to the distant music as they drifted toward sleep. Their education was woven into the very fabric of these nights. They learned the value of hospitality by watching their parents welcome the dervish and the merchant. They learned the importance of patience by watching the weaver and the plowman. Their world was one of safety and profound meaning, where every bird's call and every changing shadow had a lesson to teach. They were the saplings of the great tree Osman had seen in his dream, their roots pushing deep into the traditions of the past, while their branches reached toward a future they could only dimly imagine. There was no pressure for them to be anything other than what they were, children of the frontier, learning the language of the wind and the secrets of the soil. A scouting party returned one evening from a long journey toward the northern forests. They had traveled slowly, moving with the rhythm of the land rather than against it. They brought back reports of the vast, ancient woods, where the trees were so tall they seemed to hold up the sky. They spoke of meeting a small settlement of charcoal burners who had lived in those woods for generations. People of few words, but great kindness. The scouts had shared their salt and bread with them, and in return, they were shown the hidden paths and the clearest springs. This scouting was a form of cartography of the heart, a way of building a map of alliances and friendships that would one day sustain the growing state. They described the smell of the damp moss, the sight of the deer moving like ghosts through the mist, and the profound silence of the deep forest. Their journey had been a lesson in humility, a reminder of the vastness of the world and the small, vital place they occupied within it, as the sun began its slow descent each day, painting the sky in shades of violet, gold, and burnished copper. The village would enter a period of deep, reflective transition. The work was put aside, the tools were cleaned and stored, and the families gathered in their homes for the evening meal. This was the time for the akamsobedi, the evening conversation. Around the hearth, the day's events were distilled into wisdom. A father might tell his son about the particular way the ox had pulled today, teaching him to listen to the animal's strength. A mother might show her daughter a new knot in the carpet, a pattern that represented the flow of a river. These small, ordinary achievements were the true milestones of their history. There was no need for grand chronicles when the history of the tribe was being written. Every day in the calloused hands of the workers and the quiet prayers of the mothers. The seasons continued to turn with a majestic, unhurried pace. Spring gave way to the first warmth of summer, and the landscape became a riot of color. The wheat in the valleys grew tall and green, swaying in the breeze like a vast inland sea. The orchards were heavy with the promise of fruit apricots, plums, and the small, sweet cherries of the region. This was a time of abundance and intense labor, as the community prepared for the harvest. Yet, even in the midst of the hard work, the sense of calm remained. They understood that the earth gives in its own time, and that the best way to honor that gift is through steady, patient effort. They moved through the fields with a rhythmic grace. The sound of the scythes a rhythmic swish hiss that matched the pace of their breathing. There was a profound satisfaction in seeing the results of their spring labors, a feeling of being in perfect alignment with the cycles of creation. The relationships with the neighboring Byzantine villages continued to flourish in this atmosphere of mutual respect. In the summer heat, the Greek villagers would often bring baskets of grapes and jars of wine to the markets, while the Kayı offered the cool, refreshing air and the thick, creamy yogurt of the nomads. They shared techniques for irrigation and tips for protecting the crops from the summer storms. In these small, everyday interactions, the seeds of a new kind of society were being sown. A society where the divisions of faith and language were secondary to the shared experience of living on the land. There was a quiet wisdom in this coexistence, a recognition that the well-being of one was tied to the well-being of the other. The frontier was not a line of conflict, but a place of meeting, a fertile ground where the best of both worlds could blend and grow. The daily prayers provided the punctuation for the day. 5 moments of absolute stillness in the midst of the world's movement, at the call of the azan, which rose from the small stone mosque in a clear soaring melody. Everything would pause. The farmer would stop his plow, the weaver her loom, and the merchant his trade. They would wash in the cool water of the fountains and stand together in rows, their foreheads touching the earth in a gesture of total surrender. In those moments, the distinctions of rank and wealth vanished. They were all simply travelers on the same path, seeking the same peace. This spiritual discipline was the anchor of their lives, the source of the resilience that allowed them to face the uncertainties of the frontier with a quiet and unwavering confidence. It reminded them that they were part of a much larger story, a narrative that stretched from the beginning of time to the eternal horizon. One summer afternoon, a festival was held to celebrate the first of the harvest. It was a simple, communal affair, filled with music, wrestling, and the sharing of a great feast. The young men of the tribe competed in tests of strength and skill, their movements watched by the elders with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. The winners were not given gold or titles, but the respect of their peers and a simple wreath of wild olive branches. The women prepared large platters of pilav and roasted lamb, the air filled with the savory scent of meat and spices. There was a sense of joy that was deep and unforced, a celebration of the community's strength and the land's bounty. As the sun set and the fires were lit, the music of the saws and the copas filled the air. the rhythmic songs telling the history of the age-used Turks and their long journey to this place. It was a night of belonging, a night where the individual was subsumed into the collective heart of the tribe. The geography of Anatolia, with its dramatic shifts between high mountains and deep valleys, continued to dictate the rhythm of their lives. In the height of summer, some of the families would move to the Yela, the high summer pastures where the air was always cool and the grass was lush. This was a smaller-scale migration, a return to the nomadic roots of their ancestors. The journey up the mountain paths was a slow and beautiful procession, the bells of the pack animals tinkling in the thin, clear air. Once they reached the high meadows, they would set up their tents near the icy springs and spend the summer months in a state of elevated peace. The views from these heights were immense, stretching across the plateau to the distant, hazy horizons. Here, the world felt vast and untouched, a place where the soul could expand to match the scale of the landscape. They lived simply, focusing on the care of the animals and the quiet contemplation of the natural world. The passage of time in these high pastures seemed to slow even further. The days were measured by the movement of the shadows across the peaks, and the nights by the brilliant, crowded canopy of the stars. They watched the eagles soar on the thermal currents, and the clouds gather and disperse around the summits. There was a profound sense of timelessness in this life, a feeling of being connected to the very first shepherds who had ever walked these hills. They told stories of the mountain spirits and the ancient giants who were said to have carved the valleys. This folklore was a way of making sense of the powerful, sometimes overwhelming beauty of the landscape. It added a layer of mystery and wonder to their daily lives, reminding them that they were guests in a world that was far older and grander than they were. Ordinary heroism was found in the quiet persistence of those who stayed behind in the valley to manage the harvests. It was found in the woman who spent her days tending the communal gardens, ensuring that the older members of the tribe had fresh vegetables. It was found in the blacksmith who worked through the summer heat to repair the tools needed for the coming autumn. These were the unsung acts that kept the community together, the small threads of service that made the tapestry strong. There was no expectation of reward, only the satisfaction of doing one's part. This ethos of service was the true secret of the Kayı's endurance. They understood that a house is only as strong as its foundation, and their foundation was built on the quiet, day-to-day commitment of every member of the tribe. As the summer began to fade into the first cool breezes of autumn, the families from the high pastures would begin their descent. The return was a time of reunion, and the sharing of the summer's bounty, the thick, yellow butter and the hard white cheeses made in the mountain air. The village of St. would feel full and vibrant once more, the air buzzing with the stories of the summer. They would begin the preparations for the great autumn harvest, the time of the grapes and the olives, and the final gathering of the grain. There was a sense of urgency now, but it was a calm urgency, a focused energy that was directed toward the coming winter. They worked together to fill the granaries and the storehouses, their movements synchronized by years of shared experience. The rivers, which had been slow and clear in the summer heat, began to rise with the first autumn rains. The sound of the water became a deeper, more resonant roar, a reminder of the power of the natural world. The trees on the hillsides began their transition into the brilliant golds and reds of the season, a final display of vibrancy before the winter rest. The smell of the air changed once more, carrying the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke. This was the season of reflection, a time to look back on the year's achievements and prepare for the coming stillness. They gathered the walnuts and the chestnuts from the forests, the children competing to find the largest ones. These simple activities were the markers of their time, the small, rhythmic beats of a life lived in harmony with the earth. In the dervish lodge, the teachings focused on the theme of harvesting the soul. Just as the community gathered the fruits of the land, so the individual was encouraged to gather the fruits of their spiritual practice, patience, kindness, and a deeper understanding of the divine. They spoke of the winter as a time of internal gestation, a period when the seeds of the spirit could grow in the silence. The music of the ney became more melancholic, reflecting the fading light of the year. Yet, there was no sadness in this change, only a quiet acceptance of the natural cycle. They understood that the end of one season is simply the beginning of the next, and that the light is always present, even in the heart of the darkness. One evening, a group of travelers arrived from the distant east, carrying news of the great changes happening across the steppes. They spoke of the movement of tribes and the shifting of powers, of the long shadows cast by the great empires of the past. The elders of the Kayı listened with interest, but their focus remained on their own small piece of the world. They knew that their strength lay not in involvement in distant conflicts, but in the stability and justice they had created here in St. They offered the travelers the same hospitality they offered everyone, listening to their stories with a quiet respect. This ability to remain centered in the midst of a changing world was the true mark of their wisdom. They were not seeking to be the masters of history. They were seeking to be the masters of their own lives and the guardians of their own community. The nights grew longer and the air turned crisp and sharp once again. The first frosts began to appear on the edges of the river, a reminder that the great winter was approaching. The fires in the hearths were kept burning longer, their warmth a constant presence in the homes. The families spent their evenings in the Odenlock, the wood storage areas, ensuring that they had enough fuel for the months ahead. These practical tasks were infused with a sense of purpose and foresight. They were ready for the stillness. They looked forward to the long nights of storytelling and music, the time when the physical world retreated and the world of the imagination and the spirit took center stage. As the sun set on a late autumn day, casting a deep, violet light over the mountains, the village of St seemed to glow with a quiet and enduring strength. The houses were sturdy, the granaries were full, and the people were at peace. The call to prayer rose into the air, a beautiful and haunting melody that signaled the end of the day's work. They stood together in the soft light, their hearts joined in a single, silent prayer of gratitude. The journey of the Kayı was continuing, a slow and steady march through the landscapes of time. They were the weavers of a great tapestry, the growers of a great tree, the keepers of a great dream, and in the silence of the Anatolian night, that dream was more real than ever. The river murmured in the darkness, its dark waters reflecting the light of the stars. It was a constant presence, a reminder of the eternal flow of time and the persistence of the spirit. The village of St was asleep, the only sound the soft breathing of the sleepers and the rustle of the wind in the trees. They were safe, they were held, and they were at home. The story of the Kayı was a story of the human heart, a narrative of love, of faith, and of the enduring power of community. And in the silence of the night, that story continued to unfold, one breath at a time, toward a horizon that was filled with light. The dream of the great tree was not just a vision of the future, it was a reality of the present. It was found in the way a mother tucked her child into bed, the way a farmer tended his field, the way a dervish turned in his prayer. It was found in the hospitality offered to a stranger and the justice administered in the market. It was found in the music of the flutes and the stories of the elders. It was the living soul of the tribe, a presence that was as real as the stone in the soil. And as the night reached its deepest point, the tree seemed to glow with a soft ethereal light, its branches reaching out to cover the entire world in a canopy of peace. Rest now, in the knowledge that the world is in good hands. The ancestors are watching, the fires are tended, and the stars are in their places. There is nothing left to do but let go, and allow yourself to be carried away by the gentle currents of the night. The journey of the Kayı has brought us once more to a place of profound and holy rest. Sleep well, dear traveler, and find your peace in the timeless embrace of the past. The morning will come in its own time, but for now, the night is a sacred space of renewal and hope. Everything is calm. Everything is quiet. Sleep now, and dream of the great tree and the rivers of peace. The mountains in the distance were silent guardians, their peaks touching the heavens. They had seen the migration of 1,000 tribes and the rise and fall of 1,000 kings. To them, the small village of St was a precious moment of light and harmony, a testament to what is possible when people live in balance with the earth and with each other. The spirit of the Kayı was a quiet flame, a fire that warmed without burning, a light that guided without blinding. It was the spirit of the frontier, resilient, patient, and deeply rooted in the eternal truths of the heart. As the hours passed and the night deepened, the silence of St became a palpable thing, a heavy velvet cloak that covered the earth. The fires were extinguished, the lamps were dimmed, and the village slept under the watchful gaze of the stars. In the dervish lodge, a single seeker might remain awake, his heart still beating to the rhythm of his silent prayer, a solitary candle in the immense darkness of the world. This was the secret life of the frontier, the quiet work of the spirit that balanced the labor of the hands. The dream was alive, and the future was waiting, just beyond the horizon of the dawn. The story of the early Ottoman period is not a story of sudden explosions of power, but of the slow, steady accumulation of wisdom, faith, and community. It is the story of a people who knew how to wait, how to listen, and how to love the land they lived on. And in the silence of the Anatolian night, that story continues to unfold, one breath at a time, toward a destiny that was already written in the stars. Sleep, dear friend, and let the peace of the ages be yours. The journey goes on, but for now, there is only the stillness, and the rest, and the dream. The air grew even colder as the morning approached, a deep, crystalline chill that made the stars seem to shine even more brightly. In the stables a horse shifted its weight, the soft thud of its hoof against the earth the only sound in the stillness. A mother stirred in her sleep, reaching out to touch the cheek of her child. These small, unconscious acts of connection were the true strength of the tribe. They were the threads that held the world together, the invisible bonds of love and duty that no sword could ever break. In the quiet of the night, the Kayı were not just a tribe. They were a family, a single heart beating in the darkness. And so the night continues its slow and majestic turn. The world of St is a world of peace, of order, and of profound meaning. It is a world that invites us to slow down, to breathe, and to find our own place in the great, unfolding story of the world. As we linger in the silence of the past, let us carry the peace of the Kayı with us into our own dreams. The mountains are high, the rivers are deep, and the stars are eternal. The dream is alive, and the journey continues. The first hint of a new dawn began to appear in the far east. A thin line of pale rose against the velvet sky. The world was about to wake once more to the slow, beautiful, and eternal rhythm of life in the heart of Anatolia. But for now, there is only the silence. There is only the breath. There is only the rest. Sleep, and let the peace of history carry you into the light of a new day. The morning light of early spring in St was a gentle, silver thing, arriving not with a sudden burst, but with a slow, ethereal unfolding that seemed to pull the very soul of the land from its winter slumber. The air was cool, carrying the crystalline purity of the high peaks. Yet beneath the chill was a newfound softness, a promise of life, stirring in the dark, damp earth. Within the settlement, the transition of the seasons was mirrored in the quiet, steady movements of the people. The heavy, dark wool of winter was being aired out in the pale sunlight, while the sharp scent of thawing pine and wet stone filled the narrow lanes. There was a profound sense of continuity, a feeling that the tribe was not merely passing through time, but was becoming one with the geography of this place. The elders, seated once more upon their wooden benches under the budding plane trees, watched the world with eyes that had seen the turning of 70 springs. They saw the rhythm of the tribe as a reflection of the cosmos, a slow, patient pulse that favored the enduring over the immediate. To look upon scene these days was to see the quiet, organic organization of a people who were building a world, stone by stone and prayer by prayer, without the need for the clamor of trumpets or the rush of ambition. In the center of the village, the council of elders, the divan of the heart, met not to debate laws, but to harmonize the needs of the community. Their voices were low, blending with the sound of the nearby stream. They spoke of the distribution of seeds for the spring planting, the repair of the bridges washed out by the meltwater, and the settling of a small dispute over a pasture boundary. Their justice was like the rain, soft, pervasive, and life-giving. It was not meant to punish, but to restore the balance that allowed everyone to live in peace. Osman, now a man of deep presence and few words, sat among them, his silence more powerful than any decree. He listened to the wisdom of the old and the hopes of the young, integrating them into a vision that was as vast as the Anatolian sky. He understood that the strength of the tribe lay in its internal cohesion, in the way each person felt seen and valued within the whole. This was the quiet heroism of the frontier, the ability to maintain order through respect rather than fear, and to build a future through the steady application of fairness. The daily routines of the Kayı were infused with a sense of sacred purpose. In the workshops, the blacksmiths were transitioning from the repair of winter tools to the forging of new implements for the spring. The clinking clump of the hammer on the anvil was a rhythmic, hypnotic song that spoke of the transformation of raw elements into something useful and beautiful. Near the looms, the weavers were starting new carpets, their fingers dancing across the warp and weft as they introduced the vibrant colors of the blooming meadows, yellow from the safflower, green from the walnut husks, and the deep, rich reds of the madder root. Each pattern they chose was a map of their collective memory, a story of the steppe and the mountain woven into the fabric of their lives. These carpets were more than objects. They were the physical manifestations of the tribe's resilience, designed to provide comfort and beauty in a world that was often rugged and demanding. The atmosphere in the weaving rooms was one of deep concentration and shared silence, a place where the work of the hands was a form of meditation. As the day progressed, the movement of the flocks toward the lower meadows created a slow, white tide of wool that seemed to breathe with the mountain. The shepherds, their faces weathered and kind, moved with a leisurely stride, their long staffs clicking softly against the limestone path. They were the guardians of the tribe's wealth, but also the keepers of its solitude. In the quiet of the afternoon, the sound of the kaval flute would rise from the slopes, a thin silver melody that hung in the air like mountain mist. The music was a conversation with the landscape, a way of acknowledging the presence of the divine in the rocks, the trees, and the wind. The sheep, sensing the calm of their masters, grazed with a peaceful focus, their bells tinkling like distant water. This was the true state of the frontier, a world where the boundaries between man and nature were blurred, and where every action was done with a sense of humility and respect. In the dervish lodge, the atmosphere was one of profound and holy stillness. The seekers, many of whom had spent the winter in deep retreat, were now preparing for a season of service. They spoke of the inner spring, the awakening of the heart to the light of divine love. Their teacher, a man whose presence was as steady as the earth itself, reminded them that the purpose of their spiritual path was to become like the sun shining on the good and the bad alike, without judgment or expectation. "Be like the river," he whispered, his voice a low, resonant murmur. "The river does not choose its path. It flows where the land is lowest, and in doing so, it brings life to all it touches." The seekers listened with their hearts, their breath slowing to match the rhythm of his words. This spiritual grounding was the invisible anchor of the Kayı, the source of the inner peace that allowed them to face the outer world with such steady grace. The interactions with the neighboring villages, both Turkic and Byzantine, had reached a state of mature and stable coexistence. There was a recognized order to the frontier. a set of unspoken rules that governed trade, grazing, and the resolution of conflicts. In the small market of St, the exchange of goods was a ceremony of mutual respect. A Greek potter from a nearby town might bring his finely glazed jars to trade for the thick, creamy yogurt of the nomads. They would sit together, sharing a bowl of soup and a few quiet words, recognizing in each other a fellow traveler in the journey of life. This was the secret of the Ottoman rise, not a sudden conquest of territory, but a slow cultural integration that turned former enemies into neighbors and neighbors into kin. It was a victory of the spirit, a triumph of the heart that paved the way for the political structures that would follow. One evening, as the shadows of the mountains grew long and purple, a quiet sadness settled over the settlement. Ertugrul, the great leader who had carried his people through so many winters and across so many borders, felt the call of the eternal horizon. His passing was not a moment of crisis, but a peaceful conclusion to a life lived in total alignment with the divine. He gathered his sons and the elders around his hearth, his voice soft and clear, like the sound of dry grass in the wind. He spoke not of power or territory, but of the importance of remaining true to the values of the tribe: hospitality, justice, and faith. He told them that the land they stood on was not theirs to own, but a trust to be held for those who came after. When the final silence took him, it was as if a great ancient tree had finally come to rest, its work done, its seeds scattered to the wind. The tribe mourned him not with loud cries, but with a deep, respectful stillness, honoring his memory by continuing the daily routines he had so cherished. The transition of leadership to Osman was as natural as the passing of the seasons. There was no need for a formal coronation. The community simply looked to him, recognizing in his eyes the same light that had guided his father. Osman took up the mantle of responsibility with a profound sense of gravity and humility. He continued to live in his simple home, to work in the stables, and to sit among the elders in the council. He understood that his authority was rooted in his service to the people, and he dedicated himself to the quiet, day-to-day work of strengthening the Beyt. He traveled to the outlying villages, listening to the concerns of the farmers and the needs of the artisans, weaving them all into a single, cohesive whole. Under his steady hand, the organization of the state grew not through the imposition of external rules, but through the organic expansion of the family and the tribe. The natural world continued its majestic, unhurried turn. The spring rains came, falling in soft gray sheets that turned the plateau into a vibrant, emerald green. The scent of the air was intoxicating, a mixture of wet earth, blooming hawthorn, and the fresh, cold water of the rising rivers. The people of the Kayı moved through this world with a sense of wonder and gratitude. They watched the return of the storks to the chimneys and the nesting of the eagles in the high crags. Every sign of nature's rebirth was taken as a sign of divine favor, a confirmation that they were in harmony with the cosmos. They planted the fields with wheat and barley, their movements synchronized with the ancient rhythms of the land. There was a profound satisfaction in this work, a feeling of being a vital part of the earth's great, slow-moving cycle. Ordinary heroism continued to manifest in the small, quiet acts of daily life. It was seen in the mother who stayed awake through the night to tend a sick child, her hand a constant, soothing presence. It was seen in the young man who risked the mountain paths to retrieve a lost lamb, his courage motivated by a sense of duty to the flock. It was seen in the artisan who spent months perfecting a single piece of copperwork, his dedication a form of worship. These were the true foundations of the empire, not the grand battles or the distant sultans, but the integrity, the kindness, and the resilience of the common people. In St, the history of the world was being written in the small, unremarkable moments that formed the substance of a well-lived life. As the summer approached, the tribe prepared for the journey to the high pastures, the yellas that had been their sanctuary for generations. The movement was a grand and beautiful procession, a rhythmic flow of people and animals through the mountain passes. The tinkling of the bells, the soft thud of the horses' hooves, and the melodic calls of the shepherds created a symphony of movement that echoed through the valleys. Once they reached the high meadows, life took on a different, even more elevated quality of peace. The air was thin and clear, and the sky seemed so close that one could reach out and touch the stars. They lived in the simplicity of the tents, focused on the care of the animals and the quiet contemplation of the vast, open landscape. Here, in the high silence, the connection to the divine felt absolute. The passage of time in the Yella was marked not by hours, but by the movement of the sun across the peaks and the changing patterns of the clouds. They watched the shadows lengthen and shorten, the light turning from a brilliant, midday white to a soft, evening gold. They told stories around the fires at night, tales of the ancient ones who had first walked these hills and the spirits that guarded the springs. This folklore was a way of honoring the land's mystery, a recognition that they were part of a story that was far older and grander than themselves. The children grew up with a deep and abiding love for the mountains, their spirits expanding to match the scale of the horizon. They were the keepers of the future, the ones who would carry the dream of the great tree into the centuries to come. In the dervish lodge in the valley, the work of the spirit continued with a quiet and steady intensity. The seekers practiced the art of the breath, learning to find the point of stillness in the center of the world's movement. They spoke of the migration of the heart, the journey from the self to the divine, and back again to the service of others. Their music, the ney, the kudum, and the human voice was a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, a way of inviting the peace of the eternal into the activities of the everyday. To hear the music of the dervishes in the stillness of the night was to experience the very essence of the Ottoman soul, a blend of earthly strength and spiritual light that was unique in the world. As the years drifted by like clouds over the plateau, the small settlement of St became a beacon of stability and justice in a fragmented world. Its reputation for fairness and hospitality drew people from all directions, refugees from the wars in the east, merchants from the coastal cities, and seekers from the distant centers of learning. They were all welcomed with the same quiet dignity and offered a place within the growing community. This was the gathering of the people, the formation of a new kind of society that was built not on blood or rank, but on shared values and a common heart. The Beylik was no longer just a tribe. It was a home for all who sought a life of peace and order. The organization of the state was a slow and natural process, reflecting the growth of a healthy tree. The simple structures of the tribal council evolved into the more formal arrangements of the early administration, yet the core principles remained unchanged. The local leaders were given autonomy to manage their own affairs, provided they upheld the standards of justice and mercy that were the hallmark of Osman's rule. This decentralized approach was the secret of their endurance, allowing the state to adapt and grow without losing its soul. It was a model of governance that was based on trust rather than control, and it created a sense of loyalty and belonging that was more powerful than any army. The seasons continued to turn, each one bringing its own lessons and its own beauty. The heat of summer gave way to the crisp, clear air of autumn, and the cycle of the harvest began once more. The granaries were filled with the golden grain, the cellars with the jars of honey and oil, and the hearts of the people with a sense of profound and quiet gratitude. They were a people who knew how to wait, how to work, and how to pray. They understood that the true success of their journey was found not in the destination, but in the way they traveled. Every step was an act of faith, every breath a prayer of thanks. As we reach the conclusion of our narrative, we find the people of the Kayı at a point of perfect and holy balance. They have built a world that is both rugged and beautiful, a society that is both strong and merciful. They are rooted in the earth, yet their hearts are fixed on the eternal. The dream of the great tree, which Osman had seen in his vision, is no longer just a dream. It is a living reality, its branches providing shade and shelter to all who seek it. The rivers of peace are flowing through the valleys, and the light of the divine is shining upon the mountains. The journey of the tribe has brought them to a place of rest, but it is a rest that is full of promise and potential. The evening sun is setting now over the hills of St., painting the sky in shades of violet, gold, and deep, burnished orange. The call to prayer rises into the air, a clear and beautiful melody that signals the end of another day and the beginning of another night of rest. The fires are being lit in the hearths, their warmth a constant presence in the homes. The children are being tucked into their wool blankets, their dreams filled with the stories of their ancestors and the visions of their future. The world is quiet, the air is still, and everything is in its right place. The history of the Ottomans is a long and winding path, but here, at its beginning, there is only peace. The river murmurs in the darkness, its waters carrying the memory of the mountains to the sea. The stars are appearing one by one in the velvet sky, their light a constant and unchanging guide in a world of transition. The silence of the Anatolian night is a heavy and comfortable cloak, wrapping the world in a sanctuary of rest. There is no more past, no more future, only the perfect, quiet now. The people are safe, the land is at peace, and the story of the Kayı has found its home in the heart of the eternal. Sleep now, dear traveler, and let the peace of history carry you into the quiet realms of your own dreams, as the final embers of the fire turn to soft, gray ash. Feel the stillness of the night settling over you. You are part of this great, slow rhythm, a thread in the beautiful tapestry of the world. The wisdom of the elders, the strength of the workers, and the light of the seekers are all with you, providing a source of calm and a beacon of hope. There is nothing left to do but let go and allow yourself to be fully present in this space of absolute rest. The journey has been long, but the destination is a world of infinite peace. May your sleep be as deep as the valleys and as clear as the mountain air. The dream is alive, and the tree is growing. Its leaves are rustling in the night wind, a sound like 1,000 whispered prayers. You are safe beneath its branches, protected and loved. The story of the Ottomans is a narrative of the human spirit, a testament to what is possible when we live with integrity, compassion, and faith. Let this spirit be your guide as you navigate the landscapes of your own life. The world is at rest, and so are you. Everything is calm, everything is quiet. Sleep now, and let the peace of the ages be yours forever as you drift away. The image of the silver moon rising over the hills of St. is the last thing you see. It is a symbol of the divine light that shines through the darkness, a reminder that the morning will always come. But for now, the night is a sacred space, a time for the soul to find its own high pastures of rest and renewal. The journey is complete, and the rest is well earned. Sleep, dear friend, sleep in the deep and timeless silence of history. The dawn will come in its own time, but the peace of the night is a gift of the present. Good night, and sleep in the eternal embrace of the land. The air is perfectly still now, and the silence is absolute. The village of Saint is a place of deep and restorative peace. The fires are out, the lamps are dimmed, and the world is dreaming the dream of the tribe. You are part of that dream, part of that peace, part of that light. There is no separation between you and the story we have shared. It lives within you, a source of calm and a source of strength. Sleep now, and let the quiet currents of the night carry you toward the horizon of a new day. Everything is peaceful. Everything is still. Sleep well, and let the peace of the Kayı be your own forevermore. The hills are silent guardians, their peaks touching the stars. They have seen the beginning of this story, and they will see its continuation in the centuries to come. But here, in this moment, they are simply the protectors of your rest. Feel their strength and their stability deep within your own body. You are held by the earth and watched over by the heavens. There is no more to say, and no more to hear. There is only the breath, and the stillness, and the rest. The story of the early Ottoman period has reached its conclusion, but the peace it has brought you remains. Sleep now, and find your rest in the heart of the world. Welcome, dear traveler, to the gentle end of our journey through the early days of the Kayı and the dawn of a great dream. As the story of St settles into the quiet earth of memory, I invite you to remain exactly as you are, perfectly still, perfectly relaxed, and fully present in this sanctuary of rest. Feel the weight of the story lifting from your mind, leaving behind only a sense of profound and holy peace. Your body is heavy, your breath is slow, and your heart is at rest. There is no more history to explore tonight. Only the vast and beautiful landscape of your own dreams. The world outside is fading away, and the world within is filled with light. Take a final, slow breath, and as you exhale, let go of every remaining thought. You are safe, you are held, and you are free to sleep. The journey of 1,000 years has brought you to this moment of perfect stillness. Sleep well, dear friend, and may the peace of the Anatolian night be with you until the dawn. The silver moon is high, the stars are bright, and the mountains are silent. The rivers flow on, their voices a constant, liquid lullaby. The village of Saint is asleep, and you are sleeping with it. The story has ended, but the rest has just begun. Everything is calm, everything is quiet. Sleep, 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 the path we have walked together through the golden fields and high pastures of Anatolia has led us to this final point of stillness. As the narrative of the Kayı tribe finds its peaceful resolution, I encourage you to let the atmosphere of the frontier linger in your heart. The quiet resilience, the simple faith, and the deep connection to the land are qualities that transcend time and place. Carry them with you into your rest, knowing that you are part of a long and beautiful story of human endurance and spiritual light. There is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to remember. Just allow yourself to be carried by the gentle current of sleep toward the horizon of a new day. Everything is at peace. Everything is in balance. The night is long, and your rest is deep. May your dreams be as kind as the hospitality of the nomads and as expansive as the Anatolian sky. Sleep now, in the perfect and holy silence of history. As the last echoes of my voice drift away, imagine the soft, rhythmic sound of a distant ney flute, its melody, a song of the soul, returning to its true home. Let that music be your guide into the deepest levels of relaxation. You are drifting in a sea of calm, where the worries of the world cannot reach you. The story of Osman Ertugrul and the people of St is now a part of you, a source of internal strength and outward peace. The dawn will come when it is time, but for now, the night is your sanctuary. Sleep well, dear traveler, and find your rest in the timeless embrace of the past. The stars are watching, the earth is holding you, and all is well. Good night.